The universe has always been a tapestry of light and shadow, woven by forces beyond mortal comprehension. In one corner of existence, the DC universe pulses with the energy of gods who chose to walk among humanity, Kryptonians who became saviors, Amazons who embodied war's honor, and humans who conquered fear through will alone. In another reality, far across the dimensional void, an empire rose from a republic's ashes, ruling through star destroyers and the dark side of an ancient power called the Force. These realities were never meant to meet. Hyperspace lanes and dimensional barriers kept them separate. Two distinct philosophies of power and control developing in cosmic isolation. But the universe, in its infinite complexity, sometimes brings together what should remain apart. And when tyranny meets godhood, or when imperial doctrine encounters beings who can shatter planets with their fists, the collision reshapes everything. The dimensional rift opened without warning on a Tuesday afternoon above Metropolis. One moment, the sky held nothing but scattered clouds and the contrails of commercial aircraft. The next, reality tore like fabric, and through the wound in space emerged something that made even Superman pause mid-flight. The Imperial Star Destroyer Devastator breached into Earth's orbit, followed by three more of the Empire's wedge-shaped warships. Their hulls painted the gray of authority and dominance. On the streets below, people stopped and stared upward, phones rising to capture what their minds struggled to process. The ships were massive, over a mile long each, blotting out sections of sky like mechanical eclipse. Within seconds, saw every defense satellite, every military radar, every superhero communication system on the planet screamed warnings. In the watchtower, alarms blazed red. In the Batcave, screens filled with tactical data. In the halls of LexCorp, Lex Luthor smiled. Clark Kent had been filing a story about Metropolis's new water treatment initiative when his superhearing caught the global panic rising like a wave. He moved before conscious thought, the Daily Planet's bullpen becoming a blur, as he found a supply closet and emerged as Superman, red cape streaming as he rocketed through the building's upper windows toward the impossible ships hanging in his city's sky. He'd faced alien invasions before, Apocalypse, the White Martians, Brainiac's World Killers, but something about these vessels felt different. Their design spoke of military precision rather than alien arrogance, of an organization that conquered through discipline rather than brute force. As he approached the lead ship, smaller craft began launching from its hangar bays. TIE fighters screamed through Earth's atmosphere, their distinctive twin-engine wail creating sonic signatures that shattered windows across downtown. Superman's jaw tightened. Whatever these invaders wanted, they'd chosen the wrong planet to threaten. Inside the Devastator's command bridge, Darth Vader stood before the viewports, his breathing apparatus creating its rhythmic mechanical cadence as he studied the blue-green world below. Though the hyperspace miscalculation had been catastrophic, a failure in the navigation computer during a jump from the outer rim had torn them through dimensions rather than across galactic space. His force senses had screamed warnings during the transition, reality itself feeling wrong, twisted, fundamentally different from the galaxy he knew. And now, observing this planet through the Force, Vader understood why. The Force here felt diluted, present, but not dominant, as if it were merely one power among many rather than the fundamental energy binding all existence. More disturbing, he sensed individual life forces on the planet below that burned with impossible intensity. On Coruscant, even the most powerful Jedi had been mere candles in the Force. Whatever flew toward them now blazed like a star-going supernova, and Vader's extensive combat experience told him that level of power in a single being meant either a god or something far more dangerous. Lord Vader, Admiral Kendrick spoke, his voice carefully neutral, our sensors detect an object approaching at impossible velocity. Current speed exceeds anything in our database by a factor of... The Admiral's words cut off as Superman came to an abrupt halt 50 meters from the bridge viewport, hovering in the vacuum of space without suit or ship, arms crossed, eyes glowing with barely contained heat vision. The bridge crew stared. Vader's respirator hitched for a fraction of a second, his only tell of surprise in decades. A human, floating in hard vacuum, radiating power that Vader could feel pressing against his consciousness like a physical weight. The being's cape somehow moved despite the airless void, and Vader recognized the gesture for what it was, a demonstration. This creature wanted them to know that their ships, their weapons, their military might meant nothing to it. Superman's voice came through every communications channel simultaneously, a feat that made the Devastator's communications officer physically recoil from her station. The being had hijacked their entire fleet systems without effort, without even touching their hull. "I am Superman," the voice said, calm but carrying an edge of steel that Vader recognized from his own threats. "You have entered Earth's orbit without permission and deployed weapons in our atmosphere. You have one opportunity to explain your presence before I remove your ships from my planet's space." The phrasing was deliberate. My planet, this being considered Earth under his personal protection, spoke with the authority of ownership rather than mere defense. Vader stepped closer to the viewport, studying the alien hero through both his eyes and the Force. The power signature was staggering, but more intriguing was the restraint. This Superman could have already attacked, could have torn through the ship's hull like tissue, yet he waited, offered dialogue, demonstrated the mercy that the old Jedi had once valued. The Dark Lord made his decision with the cold calculation that had won 1,000 campaigns. "Open communications," Vader commanded, his voice cutting through the bridge's shocked silence. The viewport became a two-way channel, and Superman's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied the armored figure before him. "I am Lord Vader of the Galactic Empire," he said, each word measured and deliberate. "Our presence is unintentional, a malfunction during hyperspace transit. We find ourselves in unfamiliar space, on a world that—" He paused, considering how to phrase what the Force told him, "defies conventional understanding of power and possibility." Superman's expression didn't soften, but Vader noted the slight shift in posture, aggression held but not deployed. "If your arrival is accidental," Superman replied, "then you'll have no objection to withdrawing your ships to higher orbit while we discuss your situation. And you'll recall the fighters you deployed over civilian populations." It was phrased as statement, not question. Vader recognized a battlefield commander when he encountered one, someone accustomed to authority and capable of enforcing it. Even the question was whether the Empire could afford conflict with beings who treated vacuum like atmosphere. Before Vader could respond, the tactical officer's station erupted with new warnings. "Multiple bogies approaching from planetary surface," the officer reported, voice rising with controlled panic. 20-plus contacts, various speeds and energy signatures, some moving at relativistic velocities, others— The officer's voice caught. "Sir, some appear to be generating wormholes directly to our position." The main viewport split into multiple feeds as Earth's heroes arrived in force. A scarlet blur resolved into a man in a red suit crackling with yellow lightning, grinning as he ran across the hull of a star destroyer as if it were solid ground. The Speed Force physics making a mockery of Newtonian mechanics. Yet green energy constructs materialized as a human, in an emerald and black uniform created giant cannons from pure willpower. His ring connected to something the Empire's sensors couldn't quantify. A boom tube opened directly on the Devastator's bridge viewport, and a figure half-human, half-machine stepped through. Cyborg, his mother box technology casually bypassing every security protocol the Empire possessed. And through Earth's atmosphere, cutting through clouds like an ancient goddess of war, came Wonder Woman, golden lasso gleaming, eyes hard with Amazonian fury at those who threatened her adopted world. Superman turned his head slightly, acknowledging his ally's arrival without taking his eyes from Vader. "You're surrounded, outgunned, and in over your head," he said simply. "Now, I'll ask one more time. What are your intentions?" In the Batcave, Bruce Wayne watched 17 screens simultaneously, each showing different angles of the orbital confrontation, while his computers analyzed Imperial technology at a frightening pace. Alfred stood behind him, tea growing cold on the console. "Shall I prepare the Batwing, Master Bruce?" the butler asked. Batman's jaw tightened as he noted the Empire's weapon signatures, their formation discipline, the way their commander, this Vader, held absolute authority over his forces. "No," Bruce said quietly, pulling up files on every authoritarian regime in Earth's history. "I'm going to meet them face to face. If these people are what I think they are, Superman's approach won't work." He stood, moving toward the armory. "When military dictatorships meet overwhelming force, Or they don't surrender, Alfred. They scheme. And I need to know what they're planning before it gets everyone killed. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. Darth Vader stood motionless before the viewport, his mind calculating probabilities with the cold precision that had made him the Emperor's chosen weapon. The Empire had conquered thousands of worlds, crushed countless rebellions, and established order across an entire galaxy. But those victories had been won against civilizations bound by physics, limited by biology, constrained by the possible. This Earth operated under different rules. Art the being before him, Superman, possessed power that would require entire fleets to counter, and he was merely one among dozens. The Flash moved faster than light itself. Green Lantern created matter from thought. The half-machine being had accessed their systems as if the Empire's encryption were children's locks. And somewhere below, Vader's force senses detected others. A warrior woman whose power resonated with ancient divinity. A detective whose mind blazed with tactical brilliance despite no force presence. And something darker, older, more terrible than all of them combined, watching from a world of literal gods and monsters. Admiral, Vader said softly, his breathing the only sound on the silent bridge. Recall all TIE fighters to defensive positions. Yeah, maintain orbital position but power down weapon systems. Kendrick's face went pale. My lord, surely we're not surrendering to... The force closed around the Admiral's throat, lifting him 2 inches from the deck. I am making a tactical assessment, Vader said, voice never rising, based on the reality before us rather than the doctrine that served us in our own galaxy. We are 4 Star Destroyers facing a planet of beings who individually match the destructive capacity of capital ships. Pride will not shield us from annihilation. He released Kendrick, who crumpled back to the deck gasping. Vader turned back to Superman, inclining his head in the slightest acknowledgement. We will comply with your request, Superman. Well, perhaps we have much to discuss about how we find ourselves in your universe, and how we might return to ours. Superman's heat vision faded from red glow to normal blue eyes, and he nodded once before speaking into whatever communication system he used. Justice League, stand down to condition yellow. Maintain positions but hold fire. The Flash gave a mock salute before becoming a blur that raced back toward the planet's surface. Wonder Woman lowered her sword, but her expression promised violence if the Empire proved treacherous. Green Lantern's constructs dissolved as he maintained his position, emerald energy still crackling around his fist. Only Cyborg remained on the Star Destroyer's hull, his technological consciousness infiltrating deeper into Imperial systems with each passing second, learning everything the Empire didn't know they were revealing. In the Watchtower's main conference room, half the Justice League materialized while the other half maintained orbital watch. Batman was already there, cowl pulled back, studying holographic projections of the Imperial vessels with an expression that John Johns recognized as his planning multiple contingencies face. The Martian Manhunter settled into his seat, telepathy already reaching across the void to touch the minds aboard those ships. What he found made his alien features tighten with concern. Fear, discipline, fanatical loyalty to an emperor these soldiers had never met. And underneath it all, a darkness that the Manhunter recognized from the worst moments of galactic history, the willingness to commit atrocity in service to order. They're not invaders, John said quietly as Superman phased through the Watchtower's hull, having left the Star Destroyers under the watchful gaze of Earth's defenders. They're lost soldiers of an empire built on fear and control, and their commander? The Martian's red eyes met Batman's grim expression. Their commander has touched darkness that rivals anything I've encountered outside of Darkseid himself. Superman's fists clenched unconsciously. Then we help them find their way home, he said, and we make certain they understand that Earth isn't a world they can conquer or control. Batman's lips thinned into something not quite a smile. You're assuming they want to go home, Clark. You're assuming their empire won't see a universe full of powered beings as either the ultimate threat or the ultimate resource. He pulled up an image of Darth Vader captured by orbital satellites. This one. He radiates authority, commands absolute loyalty, and just made the tactically sound decision to de-escalate rather than fight. That makes him more dangerous than any mindless invasion force. Bruce leaned forward, cowl sliding back into place. Because intelligent enemies don't just attack, they adapt, they plan, they wait for the perfect moment. Outside the watchtower, stars shone cold and distant. And in the Empire's fleet, Darth Vader stood in darkness, reaching out through the Force to understand this impossible world, while 4 Star Destroyers hung in orbit like swords waiting to fall. The Imperial shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere with military precision, its deflector shields creating a faint shimmer as it cut through cloud layers toward the coordinates Superman had transmitted. Vader sat in the passenger compartment, flanked by 4 of his personal death troopers, elite soldiers whose black armor and modified weaponry marked them as the deadliest infantry the Empire possessed. Across from him sat Admiral Kendrick and 2 intelligence officers, their faces carefully neutral masks that barely concealed their terror at being selected for this mission. The Dark Lord had chosen his delegation with characteristic calculation. Enough force to demonstrate the Empire's martial capability, but not so much as to appear threatening to beings who could shatter Star Destroyers with their bare hands. Through the Force, Vader extended his awareness beyond the shuttle's hull, sensing the planet below with growing unease. The diversity of power signatures defied everything his decades of experience had taught him. In one location, an island hidden by what felt like divine energy, hundreds of warrior women trained with weapons both mundane and mystical, their collective strength a blazing beacon of martial discipline. In another region, beneath the ocean's surface, an entire civilization of water breathers moved through cities of coral and crystal, their technology somehow blending magic and science in ways that made Imperial engineering seem crude by comparison. And in the darkness of a city whose emotional resonance screamed of violence and corruption, a single human moved through shadows, possessing no Force presence yet radiating an intelligence and determination that made him more dangerous than many Force users Vader had killed. But most disturbing was the presence Vader felt watching from beyond this dimension, something vast and terrible that made even the Emperor's dark side power seem like a candle before a supernova. Darkseid, the intelligence briefing had named it. Lord of a world called Apocalypse. A god who sought something called the anti-life equation that would eliminate free will across all existence. Vader filed that information away carefully. The Empire and Apocalypse might have much to discuss. The shuttle touched down on the Watchtower's landing platform, artificial gravity and atmospheric containment fields, seamlessly providing breathable air in the vacuum of space. As the boarding ramp lowered, Vader descended with the measured pace of absolute authority, his cape flowing behind him, respirator breathing its steady rhythm that had preceded executions on 1,000 worlds. The Death Troopers formed up behind him in perfect synchronization, weapons held ready but not aimed, a statement that the Empire came prepared for war but willing to negotiate peace. Waiting for them in the hangar stood the representatives of Earth's power structure, and Vader assessed each with the tactical mind that had won campaigns across the galaxy. Superman stood at the center, arms crossed, expression carefully neutral. The Kryptonian's power blazed through the Force like a star-given flesh, but Vader noted the restraint in every movement, the conscious choice to appear non-threatening, despite being capable of tearing through the Watchtower's hull. Beside him stood a woman in armor that sang with ancient divine energy. Wonder Woman. The intelligence briefing had identified her, Princess of the Amazons and daughter of Zeus himself. Her hand rested on the hilt of a sword that hummed with purpose, and her eyes held the calculating assessment of a warrior who had killed before and would not hesitate to do so again. On Superman's other side stood a figure in a bat cowl and dark armor. No Force presence, no superhuman abilities that Vader could detect. Yet something about the way he held himself suggested danger of a different kind. This was Batman, and Vader recognized a fellow Predator immediately. Someone who survived through intellect, preparation, and the willingness to make impossible choices. On behind the Trinity stood others, a red and yellow figure crackling with electricity who moved with barely contained energy, the Flash. A green-suited human whose ring pulsed with emerald light connected to something vast and cosmic, Green Lantern. The half-machine being whose technological consciousness Vader could feel pressing against the shuttle systems like curious fingers, Cyborg. and a green-skinned humanoid whose telepathic power rolled across the force like gentle waves, powerful but benevolent. Martian Manhunter. Each represented a different aspect of Earth's defensive capability. Raw power, divine wrath, human determination, speed beyond physics, willpower made manifest, technological supremacy, and psychic dominance. The Emperor himself would have struggled against this assembly. If Vader alone had no chance of victory through combat, which meant victory would require other methods. Lord Vader, Superman said, his voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Welcome to the Watchtower. Before we proceed, I need your troops to surrender their weapons. You'll get them back when you leave, but we don't allow armed military forces on this station. It was a test, Vader recognized immediately. A demand to see if the Empire would submit to Earth's authority, demonstrate trust, show vulnerability. The Death Troopers shifted slightly, awaiting his command. Through the Force, Vader felt their readiness to fight and die on his order, their fanatical loyalty to the Empire's cause. One word from him, and they would open fire, knowing it would be suicide, because that was what Imperial conditioning demanded. The old Vader, Anakin Skywalker, might have felt guilt at commanding such brainwashed devotion. The current Dark Lord felt only the cold satisfaction of having reliable tools. Unacceptable, Batman's voice cut through the silence like a knife, and every eye turned toward the Dark Knight. He stepped forward, cowl shadowing his features. Superman's being diplomatic because that's what he does. I'm going to be direct. He stopped 3 meters from Vader, close enough that a normal human would feel intimidated by the Sith Lord's imposing presence. Batman didn't flinch. I've been analyzing your technology for the past 2 hours. Your ships run on fusion reactors and hypermatter. Your weapons are plasma-based energy. Your armor uses durasteel alloys and contains enough computing power to coordinate military operations across multiple star systems. He tilted his head slightly. You're not explorers who got lost. You're the military arm of an interstellar dictatorship that conquered an entire galaxy through superior firepower and authoritarian control. The question I have is simple. Are you going to try that here? The hangar fell silent except for Vader's mechanical breathing. Admiral Kendrick's hand moved toward his sidearm before Vader's slightest gesture, invisible to the watching heroes, made him freeze. Through the Force, Vader studied Batman with newfound respect. This human possessed no powers, no Force sensitivity, no divine heritage, yet he stood before a Dark Lord of the Sith without fear, or armed with nothing but knowledge and the absolute certainty that his allies would intervene if violence erupted. It was the confidence of someone who had faced gods and monsters and emerged victorious through preparation and will. In another life, Vader thought, this Batman would have made an exceptional Inquisitor. In this universe, he was something far more dangerous, a human who refused to be intimidated by beings vastly more powerful than himself. You are correct, Batman, Vader said, his voice carrying across the hangar with mechanical precision. The Galactic Empire controls millions of star systems through military force and centralized authority. We have destroyed planets that refused compliance. We have crushed rebellions that threatened order. We have sacrificed billions to maintain peace across the galaxy. He paused, on letting the admission settle. And yet, here we stand, 4 star destroyers in orbit around a single planet, facing a population that renders our military superiority meaningless. I am many things, Batman, but I am not a fool. The Empire cannot conquer Earth. The question you should be asking is whether we can coexist, or if your Justice League intends to destroy us for crimes committed in a galaxy you've never seen. Wonder Woman's eyes narrowed, and she spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the accent of ancient Greece and the authority of immortal royalty. You admit to genocide and speak of it as policy. You destroy worlds to maintain your empire's control. And you ask if we'll allow you to exist? Her hand tightened on her sword hilt. I have lived for millennia, Dark Lord. I have seen empires rise and fall. I watched tyrants claim they brought peace through subjugation. Your empire is nothing new, merely another group of powerful beings who believe might grants them the right to rule over those weaker than themselves. She stepped forward, and divine energy crackled around her form. The Amazons were created by the gods to protect humanity from such tyranny. Give me one reason I shouldn't treat your ships as I would any other invading force threatening innocent lives. Vader turned his helmeted gaze toward the warrior goddess, and for a moment, the two predators sized each other up across cultural and dimensional divides. Diana of Themyscira had killed before. Vader could sense it in the way she held herself, the absence of hesitation in her stance. She was offering no bluff, making no empty threat. If he gave the wrong answer, she would strike. And Superman's morality would not stop her from executing what she perceived as a war criminal. The Dark Lord had faced countless opponents, but few who combined divine power with warrior's pragmatism and 3,000 years of combat experience. Interesting. Because, Princess, Vader replied, you are intelligent enough to recognize that destroying our ships accomplishes nothing but creating martyrs and enemies. You cannot send us home. Your Earth possesses no hyperspace technology, and the dimensional rift that brought us here has collapsed. You cannot imprison us. We have 4-star destroyers, thousands of personnel, and the military discipline to maintain resistance indefinitely. And you cannot simply ignore us. An armed fleet in your orbit represents an ongoing threat you cannot tolerate. He spread his hands slightly, is a gesture of pragmatic reasoning, which means your only functional option is negotiation. We are stranded in your universe, Wonder Woman. We must reach an accommodation with your world, or we all face perpetual conflict that serves no one's interests. He's right, Cyborg said, his human eye troubled while his cybernetic components continued infiltrating Imperial systems. I've been analyzing their tech. It's sophisticated but completely incompatible with anything we have. Their hyperdrive runs on principles that don't exist in our physics. Even with the best scientists on the planet, we're looking at decades, maybe centuries, before we could reverse engineer a way to send them back. He glanced at Superman. They're stuck here. The question is whether we can trust them not to pull some Death Star nonsense while they're figuring out what to do. The Flash, who had been vibrating impatiently through most of the conversation, finally spoke up. Okay, I'm going to be the one to say what everyone's thinking. These guys are space Nazis, right? Like, that's basically what we're dealing with? Evil empire, scary armor, planet-destroying weapons, probably some really uncomfortable views on alien species? He looked around at his teammates. Because if they are, I vote we drop them on an uninhabited planet somewhere and let them figure out their own problems. We've got enough villains on Earth without importing them from other dimensions. Superman raised a hand, silencing the debate before it could escalate further. We're not making any decisions right now. Lord Vader, you and your delegation will be escorted to a conference room where we can discuss your situation in detail. Your troops will remain in the hangar under supervision. He gestured toward Martian Manhunter. John will accompany us to ensure honesty on both sides. If you have telepathic defenses, I suggest you don't use them. He's not trying to read your secrets, just verify you're negotiating in good faith. Vader felt the Martian's consciousness brush against his force presence like gentle fingers testing a locked door. The telepathy was powerful, sophisticated, but fundamentally different from Sith mind techniques. Vader could resist, could even crush the psychic intrusion if he chose, but doing so would destroy whatever fragile trust this meeting might establish. Instead, he lowered his mental shields fractionally, allowing John to sense his surface thoughts and immediate intentions while keeping the Empire's strategic depths hidden. It was a calculated risk, showing vulnerability to establish credibility. Through their brief connection, Vader felt the Martian's surprise, not at finding darkness, which John had expected, but at discovering the complexity beneath. Vader was a monster, yes, but a monster bound by duty, haunted by loss, driven by the belief that order justified any cost. The Sith Lord was evil, but he was not chaotic. He could be negotiated with, reasoned with, perhaps even trusted to keep his word if it served the Empire's interests. He speaks truth, John said quietly, and the other heroes relaxed fractionally. His intentions are negotiation, not conquest. For now. The Martian's eyes glowed red for a moment. But I sense great darkness in him, and greater darkness in the Empire he serves. We must proceed with caution. Batman nodded, clearly unsurprised. Caution is what I do best. Let's talk. The Death Troopers surrendered their weapons to Green Lantern's emerald constructs with visible reluctance, and Vader allowed himself to be escorted deeper into the watchtower. As they walked through corridors that hummed with technology that seemed almost alive, the Dark Lord calculated probabilities and strategies. Earth's heroes were powerful but divided. Superman operated on idealism, Batman on pragmatism, Wonder Woman on warrior's honor. Those philosophical differences could be exploited. More importantly, Earth itself contained factions beyond the Justice League. The intelligence reports mentioned governments, corporations, criminal organizations, and other superhuman groups operating independently of Superman's authority. The Empire had conquered countless worlds by allying with local powers against their enemies. Earth would be no different. As they entered the conference room, Vader's four senses detected something that made his respirator hitch again. Through the walls, through the station's hull, through the void of space itself, he felt that terrible presence he'd sensed earlier, fixing its attention on the watchtower. Darkseid was watching, and through his apocalyptic awareness, the Dark God was smiling. The Lord of Apocalypse recognized the Empire for what it was, a force of order and conquest from beyond this dimension. And in that recognition, Vader felt the first whisper of possibility. If Earth's heroes would not ally with the Empire, perhaps Earth's gods would prove more pragmatic. The game was just beginning. The conference room occupied the Watchtower's strategic heart, a circular chamber where holographic displays could project threats from across the solar system and beyond. Now those displays showed the four Imperial Star Destroyers maintaining their orbital positions, surrounded by a constellation of Justice League monitoring satellites and the distant green shimmer of Green Lantern constructs ready to activate at the first sign of aggression. Vader settled into a chair designed for beings far larger than humans. The Watchtower accommodated members ranging from ordinary humans to Martians to visiting new gods, and studied the assembled heroes with the cold calculation that had served him through decades of warfare. Admiral Kendrick and the intelligence officers flanked him, their imperial discipline holding despite the unprecedented situation of negotiating with beings who could annihilate their entire fleet through individual action. Superman took his seat across from Vader, with Batman and Wonder Woman on either side, presenting the unified front of Earth's Trinity. The others positioned themselves around the table, Flash drumming his fingers at super speed, creating a sound like distant machine gun fire until Batman's glare made him stop. Green Lantern projecting additional holographic data from his ring. Cyborg interfacing directly with the Watchtower systems while maintaining his physical presence. And Martian Manhunter hovering at the table's head, telepathic awareness extending across everyone present like an invisible web. Saw the configuration was deliberate. Vader recognized Council of War seating when he saw it. Every hero positioned to respond to treachery, every sightline calculated for optimal response time, every power set complementing the others to eliminate any tactical advantage the Empire might attempt. Batman's paranoia had designed this room, Vader suspected, and the Dark Knight's preparation showed in every detail. "Let's start with the basics," Superman said, his tone conversational but his posture still radiating controlled power. "You claim your arrival was accidental, the result of a hyperspace malfunction. Our scientists will need access to your navigation data to verify that claim and potentially help you find a way home." He leaned forward slightly. "But before we discuss technical solutions, I need to understand what we're dealing with. Tell us about your empire. How does it govern? What are its principles? And most importantly, what happens to worlds that refuse to submit to its authority?" Vader noted the phrasing, "refuse to submit," and recognized the trap being laid. If he admitted the Empire's authoritarian nature, Earth's heroes would treat them as enemies. If he lied, Martian Manhunter's telepathy would expose the deception. The old Sith strategy of concealment would not work here. Which meant the only option was truth, carefully selected and precisely framed. "The Galactic Empire rose from the ashes of the Republic," Vader began, his mechanical voice carrying across the silent chamber. "For 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights maintained peace and justice in the galaxy, but their order became corrupt, their dogma rigid, their power unchecked. Then they attempted to overthrow the rightful government, and the Republic transformed into the Empire to prevent their coup. It was the official history, the propaganda that every Imperial citizen learned, and it contained just enough truth to make the lie convincing. The Jedi were wiped out, Vader continued, feeling Wonder Woman's eyes narrow at his casual mention of genocide. Their survivors hunted as traitors to the state. The Emperor established order through strength, eliminated the corruption that had plagued the Republic's Senate, and brought stability to millions of systems that had suffered through endless wars. He paused, letting his breathing fill the silence. Yes, Princess, the Empire has destroyed worlds. Alderaan was obliterated as an example when its leaders supported rebellion against legitimate authority. Other planets have suffered similar fates when they chose insurrection over peace. His helmeted gaze swept across the assembled heroes. You judge us as tyrants, but you have never witnessed the chaos that preceded our order. Slavery flourished under the Republic. Crime syndicates controlled entire sectors. Wars between systems killed billions. The Empire ended that chaos through strength and unity. By becoming the thing you claim to oppose, Batman's voice cut through Vader's justification like a vibroblade. The Dark Knight leaned forward, cowl shadowing his expression. I've studied authoritarian regimes throughout Earth's history. Rome, Sparta, the Third Reich, Soviet Russia, North Korea. Every single one claimed they brought order from chaos, security from threat, i.e. peace through strength. His gauntleted hand gestured at the holographic displays. Every single one required enemies to justify their existence. Tell me, Lord Vader, how many rebellions has your empire crushed? How many uprisings have you personally put down? Because from where I'm sitting, an empire that constantly faces rebellion from its own citizens isn't bringing stability. It's enforcing compliance through terror. Vader's respirator quickened slightly, the only external sign of his reaction to Batman's analysis. Through the Force, he felt the Dark Knight's absolute certainty, the moral conviction underlying his pragmatic exterior. This was a human who had witnessed Gotham's corruption, fought its crime for years, yet refused to cross the line into authoritarianism, despite how much easier ruling through fear might be. My Batman understood the temptation of absolute power and rejected it deliberately, choosing to work within systems rather than replacing them. It made him more dangerous than opponents who simply opposed the Empire's methods. Batman opposed its philosophy from a position of experiential wisdom rather than naive idealism. The rebellions exist because sentients are flawed, Vader replied, his tone hardening. They prioritize individual freedom over collective security, personal desire over the common good. The rebel alliance you reference operates from weakness, hiding in remote systems, conducting terrorist operations that kill innocents, all while claiming they fight for liberty. He stood, cape swirling, and walked to the viewport overlooking Earth. Look at your planet, Batman. I have spent 2 hours studying your world through orbital surveillance and force observation. I see governments paralyzed by competing interests. I see crime in your cities, poverty in your streets, corporations exploiting workers while your leaders debate endlessly. I see chaos barely contained by individuals with godlike power who act according to personal morality rather than systematic law. He turned back to face the table. Your Justice League operates outside governmental authority. You make decisions affecting millions based on your own judgment. How is that different from what you accuse the Empire of doing? Wonder Woman's fist slammed against the table, hard enough to crack the reinforced material, divine strength barely restrained. We fight to protect people's freedom to choose their own destinies. We intervene when governments fail or tyrants rise, then step back and allow democratic processes to continue. We do not conquer, do not enslave, do not destroy entire worlds because they dare to disagree with our vision of order. Her eyes blazed with Olympian fury. I have lived through millennia of empires, Vader. I watched Rome fall, witnessed Alexander's conquests, saw Napoleon's ambitions crumble. Every empire believes it brings enlightenment, but all empires are built on the graves of those who refuse to kneel. Your empire is no different, merely another tyrant with better weapons and prettier lies. The tension in the room spiked to dangerous levels. Flash vibrated in his chair, ready to move at light speed. Green Lantern's ring glowed brighter, emerald constructs forming at unconscious thought. E-Cyborg's weapon systems armed themselves, targeting solutions calculating against Imperial armor. Superman raised a hand, heat vision flickering red in his eyes before he forced it back to blue. Only Martian Manhunter remained still, telepathic presence expanding to blanket the room with calming psychic pressure. Peace. John's voice resonated with subtle mental influence. We came here to negotiate, not to wage philosophical war. Both sides have made their positions clear. Perhaps we should focus on practical matters. Batman nodded, pulling up holographic schematics of the Imperial Star Destroyers with disturbing completeness. He'd apparently hacked their systems as thoroughly as Cyborg had. Your ships are running on reserves. Your hypermatter reactors are efficient, but you're cut off from your supply lines, your refueling stations, i.e. everything that keeps a fleet operational. Based on current consumption rates, you have approximately 14 months of full operational capacity before you start having to make hard choices about power allocation. He highlighted sections of the Devastator. You're also carrying approximately 12,000 personnel across your 4 ships. That's 12,000 people who need food, water, air, and purpose. 12,000 soldiers trained for military operations who are currently stuck in orbit with nothing to do. His eyes narrowed. That's not a sustainable situation, Lord Vader. Eventually, your people will need to integrate with Earth society or find somewhere else to establish themselves. Which brings us to the question you've been avoiding. What does the Empire want from us? Vader returned to his seat, or recognizing that Batman's tactical analysis had cornered him into honesty. The Dark Knight had done in minutes what would have taken Imperial intelligence weeks, assessed the fleet's vulnerabilities and forced a discussion of strategic necessities rather than philosophical ideals. The Empire requires 3 things, Vader said, with the directness of someone who knew further maneuvering was pointless. First, access to resources and facilities that will allow us to maintain our ships and sustain our personnel while we seek a method to return to our dimension. Second, information about your universe's dimensional structure, physics, and any technology or power that might facilitate cross-dimensional transit. A third, non-aggression from Earth's governments and superhuman populations while we pursue the first 2 objectives. In exchange for what? Superman asked, his reporter's instincts recognizing a negotiation taking shape. You're asking for resources, knowledge, and security. What does Earth get in return for helping an empire that destroys planets and crushes freedom? Vader had prepared for this question, had calculated the offer most likely to appeal to Earth's fractured power structure. Technology, he said simply. The Galactic Empire possesses scientific knowledge accumulated across millions of inhabited systems over thousands of years. Medical advances that could cure diseases you consider terminal. Energy technology that could power your civilization without environmental damage. Manufacturing techniques that could eliminate scarcity. Military hardware that could defend against threats. Even your superhumans might struggle to counter. He gestured at the holographic displays. I observed energy signatures from beyond your dimension during our arrival. Darkseid's Apocalypse, I believe your files named it. A civilization of gods who seek to eliminate free will through something called the anti-life equation. You face threats of cosmic scope, Superman. The Empire's technology and tactical knowledge could help you survive them. The heroes exchanged glances, and Vader felt the shift in the room's dynamic. He'd found the lever. Earth's heroes were powerful individually, but constantly faced threats that required more than superhuman abilities. Technology, strategy, Iran's systematic approach to warfare were precisely what the Justice League often lacked. Batman worked alone in Gotham with resources focused on urban crime fighting. Superman operated on instinct and power rather than tactical doctrine. Wonder Woman commanded warriors but not armies. The Empire offered what Earth's heroes needed most: military organization and advanced technology to complement their individual might. It was a devil's bargain, and Vader could see Batman recognizing it as such, but it was also pragmatically appealing in ways that pure rejection would struggle to counter. No, Batman said flatly, and Vader felt a moment of respect for the Dark Knight's refusal to compromise, despite the strategic appeal. I've read enough history to know what happens when desperate governments make deals with authoritarians offering technological salvation. Today, it's medical tech and clean energy. Tomorrow, it's surveillance systems and population control. Next week, it's security measures that look suspiciously like the infrastructure for totalitarian rule. He stood, cape draping like shadows given form. The Empire isn't offering help. It's offering addiction. We use your technology, become dependent on it, and suddenly we're compromised when you decide to leverage that dependency for political concessions. Batman's voice hardened to steel. Earth has faced gods, monsters, alien invasions, and reality-warping threats. We've survived through our own efforts, our own heroes, our own determination. We don't need your Empire's help, and we won't sell our freedom for convenience. Bruce, Superman began, but the Dark Knight cut him off with a gesture. Think it through, Clark. They can't go home. Their dimensional rift is closed, and we don't have the technology to reopen it. They need resources we control, cooperation we provide, and protection we offer from the governments that will want to dismantle their ships and reverse engineer their tech. Batman turned to Vader, and his next words carried the weight of checkmate. Which means you're not negotiating from strength, Lord Vader. You're negotiating from desperation. You can offer technology, knowledge, and military expertise, but we can take all of that by force if necessary. The Justice League could board your ships right now and confiscate everything we want. The only reason we're having this conversation instead of that assault is because Superman believes in giving people chances to do the right thing. He leaned forward. So here's my counter-offer. You surrender your weapons, submit to monitoring, and accept refugee status on Earth. We help you sustain your people and search for a way home. In exchange, you share your knowledge freely, submit to our laws, and abandon any ambitions of establishing imperial authority in this dimension. Take it or prepare to have your ships dismantled around you. The conference room fell into silence, broken only by Vader's mechanical breathing. Admiral Kendrick's hand moved toward his sidearm again, a futile gesture against beings who could disarm him faster than neurons could fire. The intelligence officers sat frozen, waiting for their Dark Lord's command. Through the Force, Vader felt the crossroads stretching before him. Accept Batman's terms and reduce the Empire to refugees dependent on Earth's mercy. Reject them and face military action the Empire could not win, or find a third path that these heroes, with their rigid morality, had not anticipated. The old Vader, Anakin Skywalker, might have chosen honor over pragmatism. The Sith Lord, who had learned from Emperor Palpatine's teachings, knew that survival required flexibility. That power came not from direct confrontation, but from finding the cracks in enemy unity and exploiting them without mercy. I will need to consult with my senior officers, Vader said, standing slowly. This decision affects thousands of Imperial personnel. I cannot make it unilaterally. It was a delaying tactic, and everyone in the room knew it. None but Superman nodded anyway, because his Boy Scout morality demanded he allow the enemy time to consider surrender. You have 24 hours, the Kryptonian said. After that, we'll need an answer. In the meantime, your ships remain under observation, and you're free to return to your fleet. Wonder Woman's expression suggested she disagreed with granting any time, but she deferred to Superman's leadership with visible effort. Batman's cowled face revealed nothing, but Vader felt certain the Dark Knight was already preparing contingencies for every possible response the Empire might make. As the Imperial delegation returned to their shuttle, under Green Lantern's escort, Vader's mind raced through strategic calculations. Batman's assessment was accurate. The Empire could not win a direct military confrontation with Earth's defenders. But war was not the only path to victory. Earth contained 7 billion humans, hundreds of governments, thousands of corporations, and numerous factions who operated outside Justice League authority. The files Cyborg had been accessing from Imperial systems flowed both ways. Vader's own intelligence officers had been mining Earth's networks with equal efficiency. They had identified a billionaire industrialist named Lex Luthor, who possessed genius-level intellect and harbored documented hatred for Superman. They had located a government official named Amanda Waller, who controlled a team of supervillains for black operations her government officially denied. They had discovered criminal organizations, rogue nations, and anti-metahuman movements who viewed the Justice League as threats rather than saviors. Earth's heroes were powerful, but they were not unified, not truly. And where unity fractured, the Empire could insert itself like a blade, finding armor's weak point. As the shuttle docked with the Devastator, Vader made his decision. The Empire would not surrender to Batman's ultimatum, but neither would they fight Earth's heroes directly. Instead, they would do what the Empire had done on 1,000 worlds: find allies among those who feared their own protectors, offer technology to those who craved power, and slowly, systematically, transform Earth from within until resistance to Imperial authority became impossible to organize. The Justice League would realize their mistake eventually, but by then, it would be too late. Order would come to this chaotic world, one way or another. And if that order required alliance with beings even darker than the Empire itself, Vader was prepared to pay that price. After all, he had already sacrificed his soul for peace. What was one more compromise in service to the galaxy's greater good? The Devastator's war room thrummed with tension as Vader convened his senior staff in the hours following the ultimatum. 20 officers surrounded the holographic tactical display, showing Earth in rotating three-dimensional detail, each representing different branches of Imperial operations: intelligence, logistics, engineering, security, and military command. Admiral Kendrick stood at attention near Vader's right hand, his earlier throat-crushing having reinforced the Dark Lord's absolute authority over dissenting opinions. The hologram cycled through data streams that Imperial probe droids and passive sensors had collected during their orbital surveillance. Population centers, government structures, military installations, and most importantly, the locations and movement patterns of Earth's superhuman defenders. What the display revealed was simultaneously encouraging and deeply troubling. Earth's defensive capability is concentrated in approximately 200 superpowered individuals, the intelligence chief reported, highlighting clusters of energy signatures across the globe. The Justice League represents the primary threat: 7 core members with abilities ranging from Superman's Kryptonian physiology to Green Lantern's weaponized willpower. Secondary threats include the Teen Titans, various independent operators in cities like Gotham and Metropolis, and the Atlantean military forces numbering in the hundreds of thousands. She pulled up comparative analysis that made several officers visibly pale. To put this in perspective, our turbo-laser batteries would require sustained bombardment to potentially harm Superman. The Flash moves faster than our targeting computers can track. Wonder Woman's divine weapons could theoretically cut through Durasteel. And we've detected at least 3 individuals: Superman, Martian Manhunter, and someone called Shazam, who individually possess the destructive capacity of entire Imperial fleets. However, she continued, and Vader noted the shift in her tone from fear to calculation, Earth's governments possess minimal control over these metahumans. The Justice League operates independently, answering to no nation or international body. Many governments view them with suspicion or outright hostility. We've intercepted communications from at least 47 nations expressing concern about superhuman oversight, and several have active programs attempting to create controlled metahuman forces to counter Justice League influence. The hologram shifted to show LexCorp Tower in Metropolis, glowing red to indicate high strategic value. This individual, Lex Luthor, represents our most promising initial contact: billionaire industrialist, genius-level intellect, documented antagonism towards Superman, and political connections spanning multiple governments. He's currently developing anti-Superman weaponry and has expressed public concerns about metahuman accountability that align with Imperial doctrine regarding Force user oversight. Vader studied the hologram of Luthor with interest. The bald human's profile read like a case study in ambitious pragmatism. Multiple attempts to kill or discredit Superman, each more sophisticated than the last. Corporate empire built on advanced technology and ruthless business practices. Political aspirations that had briefly made him president of the United States, and a philosophical position that extraterrestrial beings with godlike power represented an existential threat to human sovereignty. The Emperor would have recognized a kindred spirit immediately, someone who understood that individual power unbound by systematic control inevitably led to chaos or tyranny. The irony that Luthor himself craved personal power enough to commit atrocities was not lost on Vader, but consistency had never been a requirement for useful allies. "What about this Waller woman?" Vader asked, gesturing at another highlighted location: Belle Reve Penitentiary in Louisiana. The reports indicate she commands metahuman criminals in service to her government. The intelligence chief nodded, pulling up files that made even hardened Imperial officers uncomfortable. Amanda Waller heads Task Force X, colloquially known as the Suicide Squad. She recruits supervillains from maximum security prisons, implants explosive devices in their necks, and deploys them on black operations with high mortality rates. Her political philosophy aligns with extreme pragmatism. She views all metahumans, hero and villain alike, as potential assets or threats to be controlled through any means necessary. The hologram showed mission records of extraordinary brutality. Metahumans sent to their deaths in operations their own government officially denied, civilians sacrificed for strategic objectives, and a pattern of manipulation that would have impressed Sith intelligence. Waller has attempted to recruit Justice League members multiple times, the intelligence chief continued. Batman has worked with her on occasions, though he maintains extreme skepticism of her methods. Superman refuses all contact after learning about her willingness to sacrifice innocents. She views the Justice League as a rogue element operating outside democratic control, powerful vigilantes who impose their morality on the world without accountability. The officer highlighted several encrypted communications. Most relevantly, she's currently attempting to acquire advanced technology to create weapons capable of neutralizing League members if they ever go rogue. The scenario she references repeatedly in classified briefings is called the Injustice Timeline, an alternate reality where Superman became a totalitarian dictator after the Joker murdered his wife and unborn child. Waller believes similar corruption is inevitable and is preparing countermeasures. Vader felt a cold satisfaction spreading through his connection to the dark side. The Earth's Guardians face the same fundamental problem that had destroyed the Jedi Order. Immense power concentrated in individuals accountable only to their own moral codes, with no systematic oversight to prevent corruption or ensure consistent application of justice. The Jedi had policed themselves for millennia until their arrogance blinded them to rot within their own ranks. Earth's heroes were younger, less disciplined, and already showing cracks in their philosophical unity. Batman prepared contingencies to kill his own teammates. Superman struggled with the temptation of absolute power. Wonder Woman's warrior culture accepted killing when Batman's code forbade it. The Justice League was not an impenetrable alliance. It was a coalition held together by personal friendships and shared enemies rather than institutional structure. And coalitions could be fractured. "We will pursue a three-pronged strategy," Vader announced, his mechanical voice cutting through the war room's analytical murmuring. First, establish contact with Lex Luthor and offer technological exchange. We provide him with knowledge to counter Superman's abilities. Nothing sufficient to actually kill the Kryptonian, but enough to make Luthor dependent on continued Imperial cooperation. In exchange, he provides us with resources, manufacturing facilities, and political cover among Earth's governments. Several officers nodded, recognizing standard Imperial procedure for co-opting local power structures. Second, approach Amanda Waller through intelligence channels. Offer Imperial military training, advanced surveillance technology, and tactical doctrine for controlling metahuman populations. None frame it as assistance for legitimate governmental authority against vigilante actors who recognize no law but their own judgment. Third, and here Vader paused, feeling the dark side coiling around his next words like serpents preparing to strike. We establish communication with Apocalypse. The war room fell silent. Admiral Kendrick's face went pale. My lord, the Admiral spoke carefully, aware that questioning Vader's judgment had nearly killed him before. Our intelligence indicates that Darkseid is a cosmic-level threat who seeks to eliminate free will across all existence. Allying with such an entity seems strategically questionable. Vader's respirator quickened slightly, not with anger, but with the cold calculation that had won him battles against impossible odds. We are not allying with Darkseid, Admiral. We are opening diplomatic channels with a power that shares our interest in systematic order over chaotic individualism. Darkseid seeks the anti-life equation. The Empire seeks galactic stability. Those objectives need not conflict. The Justice League will interpret any contact with Apocalypse as an act of war, the intelligence chief warned. They've fought multiple battles against Darkseid's forces. Superman considers him one of the greatest threats to Earth's existence. If we're discovered working with Apocalypse in any capacity, we lose any possibility of negotiating peaceful coexistence with Earth's heroes. Vader turned to face the officer, cape swirling with the movement. You assume we still seek peaceful coexistence, Commander? Batman's ultimatum made clear that Earth's heroes will not tolerate Imperial sovereignty in this dimension. They demand our surrender, our disarmament, our submission to their authority. That is not negotiable. His hand clenched into a fist. But neither is the Empire's survival. If we cannot coexist with the Justice League, we must ensure they cannot destroy us. Alliance with Darkseid provides leverage, the threat that forcing our hand will drive us into the arms of Earth's greatest enemy. The strategic logic was sound, but several officers still looked troubled. Captain Voss, the Devastator's chief engineer, spoke up with the technical concerns that made him invaluable despite his occasional insubordination. Even with Luthor's resources and Waller's political cover, we're looking at years before we could establish sufficient infrastructure to support our forces independently. Our reactors will degrade without proper maintenance facilities. Our weapons need specialized ammunition we can't manufacture with Earth technology. Our personnel will require housing, food, medical care beyond what our ships can provide indefinitely. He highlighted sections of the orbital display. We're 4 star destroyers against a planet of gods, my lord. Even with clever diplomacy and strategic alliances, the mathematics don't favor long-term Imperial presence unless we can find a way home or establish such deep integration with Earth's power structures that removing us becomes politically impossible. Which is precisely what we will do, Captain, Vader replied. The Empire has conquered thousands of worlds using the same methodology. Identify local factions struggling for power, provide them with superior technology and tactical support. Allow them to establish Imperial-aligned governance structures, then integrate their systems into the broader Imperial framework. He pulled up historical files showing successful planetary acquisitions. On Ryloth, we allied with one clan against others, provided military support during their civil war, and emerged with a grateful government that granted us mining rights and military bases. On Geonosis, we exploited separatist/loyalist divisions until both sides begged for Imperial intervention to end the bloodshed. And Earth is no different. It is merely a matter of finding the right pressure points and applying force with precision rather than overwhelming strength. A junior officer, young, idealistic, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this strategy was taking, raised her hand hesitantly. Vader gestured for her to speak. My lord, Lieutenant Kira began, her voice wavering slightly. Everything we're discussing represents manipulation and exploitation of a civilization that hasn't attacked us. Batman's ultimatum was harsh, but Superman offered genuine assistance finding a way home. Wonder Woman expressed moral objection to our Empire's practices, but didn't actually attack, despite having the power to do so. She swallowed hard, continuing despite the dangerous ground she was treading. The Jedi Code taught that the dark side offered quick power, but ultimately led to self-destruction. If we pursue this strategy of division and alliance with beings like Darkseid, aren't we proving Earth's heroes correct in their assessment of the Empire as fundamentally evil? The war room fell deathly silent. Several officers stepped subtly away from Lieutenant Kira, not wanting to be associated with her words when Vader's inevitable rage descended. Through the Force, Vader felt their fear, their certainty that he would crush this young officer's throat for daring to reference the Jedi in his presence, for questioning Imperial policy, for suggesting that Earth's heroes might possess moral authority the Empire lacked. Or the old Anakin Skywalker, the Jedi Knight who had believed in justice and honor, stirred somewhere in the depths of Vader's consciousness, recognizing the courage it took for this lieutenant to speak truth to absolute power. But Anakin was dead, buried beneath years of dark side corruption and the certainty that order justified any cost. What remained was Darth Vader, and the Dark Lord had learned long ago that moral high ground meant nothing without the strength to enforce it. The Jedi Code led to the Republic's collapse and the death of every Jedi who believed in it, Vader said softly, his mechanical breathing the only sound in the frozen room. It taught that attachment led to suffering, so Jedi suppressed all emotional connections. It taught that violence was a last resort, so Jedi hesitated when decisiveness was required. It taught that power should be used only in service to others, so Jedi became servants rather than leaders, allowing corrupt politicians to drag the galaxy into wars that killed trillions. He walked toward Lieutenant Kira, who stood at rigid attention, trembling, but refusing to back down. The Jedi believed their morality made them superior, Lieutenant. It made them extinct. The Empire's philosophy may seem harsh to those who value individual freedom over collective stability, but it has brought peace to millions of systems where the Jedi's high-minded principles brought only chaos. Vader stopped directly in front of Kira, towering over her. Through the Force, he could feel her terror, warring with conviction, her certainty that she was about to die balanced against the belief that someone needed to question orders that felt wrong. And it reminded him of Ahsoka Tano, his former Padawan, who had possessed the same stubborn morality even when it cost her everything. However, Vader continued, and felt the room's shock at that word, you demonstrate courage in questioning authority despite the personal cost. That is valuable, Lieutenant, even when your conclusions are incorrect. He turned away from her, returning to the tactical display. You are reassigned to the Intelligence Division. I want your perspective on our Earth strategy specifically because you will identify moral objections that others will suppress out of fear. An effective commander requires advisors who speak truth, not sycophants who tell him what he wishes to hear. The tension broke like shattered glass. Lieutenant Kira stood in stunned silence, clearly having expected execution rather than promotion. And the other officers began breathing again, reassessing the Dark Lord's tolerance for dissent. Vader felt their recalculation through the Force. He had just demonstrated that competence and courage earned reward even when accompanied by criticism. It was a calculated gesture designed to inspire loyalty through unpredictable mercy, a technique Emperor Palpatine had used to bind followers more securely than fear alone could manage. The Empire is not evil, Lieutenant Kira, Vader said, studying Earth's hologram with eyes that had witnessed the fall of republics and the rise of tyranny. It is necessary. And this Justice League, for all their power and moral certainty, will learn what the Jedi learned too late. That peace requires more than good intentions. It requires the willingness to make choices that moral purists consider unthinkable. Dismissed, Vader commanded, and the officers filed out with military precision, already beginning to implement the three-pronged strategy that would either secure the Empire's foothold in this dimension or provoke a war they could not win. Admiral Kendrick remained behind, waiting until the room cleared before speaking. My lord, a question if I may. Vader inclined his head fractionally. You spoke of contacting Darkseid to gain leverage against the Justice League. But Darkseid is described in Earth's files as a being of cosmic power who has fought the entire Justice League simultaneously and nearly won. If we ally with such an entity, what prevents him from simply taking what he wants from us rather than honoring any agreement we make? Vader turned to face his admiral, and through the Force reached out toward the malevolent presence lurking beyond dimensional barriers in a hellish world called Apocalypse. The Dark God's attention shifted toward him like a spotlight of pure malice, focusing on an insect. For a moment, Vader felt the weight of Darkseid's power pressing against his consciousness. Ancient, terrible, vast beyond anything he had encountered, save perhaps the Emperor at his darkest. But the Dark Lord of the Sith did not flinch, did not retreat. Instead, meeting that cosmic awareness with the cold certainty of someone who had touched ultimate darkness and survived. Nothing prevents Darkseid from betraying us, Admiral, Vader said quietly. Just as nothing prevents us from betraying him when circumstances demand it. That is the nature of alliances built on mutual benefit rather than moral alignment. We use each other until one side no longer serves the other's interests. Then we become enemies. It is the same relationship the Empire maintains with local governors, corporate interests, and criminal organizations across our galaxy. The difference, Vader continued, pulling his awareness back from Apocalypse before Darkseid decided to test his strength, is that we understand this truth. While Earth's heroes cling to the illusion that trust and goodwill matter in strategic calculations, Superman will negotiate in good faith because his moral code demands it. Batman will prepare contingencies but won't strike preemptively because he needs evidence of hostile intent. Wonder Woman will honor warrior codes that prevent treachery before formal declarations of war. Their ethics make them predictable, Admiral, and predictable enemies can be maneuvered into positions where their own principles trap them more effectively than any weapon. The hologram of Earth rotated slowly between them, a blue-green marble housing 7 billion humans and hundreds of godlike beings who possessed power beyond Imperial technology but lacked the systematic ruthlessness to use it effectively. Vader felt the dark side whispering possibilities. Luthor's genius, weaponizing Imperial knowledge against Superman. Waller's pragmatism, accepting authoritarian solutions to metahuman oversight. Darkseid's cosmic ambitions aligning temporarily with Imperial expansion. The pieces were moving into position for a campaign that would not be won through turbolasers and TIE fighters, but through careful exploitation of Earth's fractured political landscape and the fundamental weakness in the Justice League's philosophical foundation. They believed power should be used to protect freedom, but they had never confronted the question of what to do when protecting freedom required eliminating it. The Empire had asked that question millennia ago and accepted the answer. Freedom was chaos unless constrained by order, and order, ultimately, flowed from the barrel of a blaster or the edge of a lightsaber. Earth's heroes would learn that lesson, one way or another. And when they did, the Galactic Empire would be there to offer the structure and stability they desperately needed, whether they wanted it or not. Lex Luthor stood in his private penthouse laboratory 70 stories above Metropolis, studying the holographic projection of the Imperial Star Destroyer with the focused intensity that had made him Earth's greatest scientific mind. The vessel rotated slowly in three-dimensional detail. Every weapon emplacement, every structural weakness, every technological system laid bare by LexCorp's orbital satellites and quantum analysis arrays. Most humans looking at such displays would see an alien warship, a threat to be feared or destroyed. Luthor saw opportunity wrapped in durasteel and powered by principles of physics his Earthbound competitors hadn't even theorized. The fusion reactors alone represented a leap forward in energy generation that could revolutionize civilization, or, more importantly, or provide the power source necessary to finally create weapons capable of killing Superman. The alien ship's communication system had sent him an encrypted message 3 hours ago, requesting private audience with Earth's preeminent human intellect regarding matters of mutual strategic interest. Luthor's ego appreciated the flattery, even as his paranoia demanded he analyze every possible angle of what was clearly a trap. Mercy, Luthor spoke to his bodyguard and chief of security, a woman whose enhanced strength and tactical implants made her dangerous enough to survive in Luthor's world of corporate warfare and superhuman threats. Analysis of the Imperial communication protocols. Mercy Graves pulled up data streams on her tactical pad, purple-tinted combat visors scanning through layers of encryption that would have stymied government intelligence agencies. The message originated from the lead Star Destroyer, the Devastator. Signal used quantum entanglement communication principles we've never seen before, completely untraceable and impossible to intercept. Sender identified as Lord Vader, described in their own files as Supreme Commander of Imperial Forces and the Emperor's personal enforcer. She highlighted sections of intercepted Imperial communications that LexCorp's satellites had captured during the Justice League's initial contact. He's some kind of warrior monk with telekinetic abilities called the Force. Killed thousands personally, commands absolute loyalty from his troops, and according to their internal assessments, is one of the most dangerous individuals in their entire empire. Luthor smiled thinly. So he's their Superman, an individual with godlike power who operates outside normal chains of command, answerable only to the highest authority, capable of destroying anyone who opposes him through sheer personal might. He studied the hologram of Vader's armored form, noting the life support systems integrated into the suit, the mechanical breathing apparatus. The fact that beneath all that intimidating armor was apparently a human who had been severely injured and rebuilt with cybernetics. Interesting. Their ultimate weapon is a cripple in a metal suit. That suggests their civilization values augmentation over natural superiority. I sees technology as a tool for overcoming biological limitations rather than something to be feared or regulated. His expression hardened with familiar resentment. Unlike Earth's meta-human-loving population, who worship genetic freaks like the Kryptonian while viewing human enhancement with suspicion. Sir, Mercy's tone carried warning, the Justice League will be monitoring all communications from those Star Destroyers. If you meet with this Vader, Superman will know. Batman will investigate. You could be charged with collaborating with hostile forces. Luthor's laugh held no humor. The Justice League has no legal authority to charge me with anything, Mercy. I'm a private citizen conducting diplomatic outreach to visitors from another dimension. If Superman has problems with that, he can file a complaint with the actual government, assuming he recognizes their authority this week. He pulled up files on every recorded Justice League intervention, highlighting cases where they'd acted without governmental approval, violated sovereign borders, and imposed their judgment on situations where democratically elected leaders had disagreed with their assessment. The alien and his friends operate as a rogue state with superpowers. At least this empire recognizes formal chains of command and systematic authority. That alone makes them more trustworthy than flying gods, who answer to no one. Mercy knew better than to argue when Luthor's anti-Superman obsession colored his judgment, but she tried anyway. The Empire destroys planets that refuse to submit to their authority, like they're authoritarian conquerors who maintain power through fear and military force. Working with them could make you complicit in maintaining order and stability across millions of inhabited systems, Luthor interrupted, in preventing the chaos that occurs when power is concentrated in individuals rather than institutions, in ensuring that beings with godlike abilities answer to systematic oversight rather than personal whim. He turned to face his bodyguard. Mercy, I have spent 20 years fighting against Superman's implicit tyranny. The assumption that because he's powerful and well-intentioned, he has the right to intervene in human affairs without accountability. This empire, whatever its flaws, at least operates on the principle that power requires structure. I can work with that. Yeah, I cannot work with an alien who decides Earth's fate based on his Kansas farm boy morality. The decision made, Luthor activated the response protocol, sending an encrypted message back to the Devastator accepting the meeting request. Within minutes, his penthouse sensors detected an energy signature materializing on his private landing pad. A Lambda-class shuttle descending through Metropolis's airspace with stealth technology that rendered it invisible to everything except LexCorp's quantum detection grid. Luthor watched through reinforced windows as the angular vessel settled onto his rooftop, its boarding ramp extending with hydraulic precision. Two figures emerged, the towering form of Darth Vader, cape billowing in wind generated by the shuttle's repulsor lifts, and a single officer in gray Imperial uniform carrying a data cylinder. No guards, no obvious weapons, just two representatives of an interstellar empire trusting that Lex Luthor valued potential alliance more than immediate betrayal. The calculated risk impressed him. Vader clearly understood that showing vulnerability built trust more effectively than arriving with overwhelming force. Luthor met them in his conference room, a space designed to intimidate through minimalist perfection. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Metropolis, holographic displays showing LexCorp's global operations, and a tactical analysis table that could project everything from stock markets to military deployments. Vader entered like a force of nature, his mechanical breathing dominating the acoustic space, his armored presence radiating authority that needed no introduction. Luthor felt the instinctive fear response. Prey animal recognizing apex predator, and suppressed it through sheer will. He'd faced Superman, Darkseid, and Brainiac without flinching. Some cyborg in a Halloween costume wouldn't intimidate him, regardless of how many planets he'd supposedly conquered. Lord Vader, Luthor extended his hand, a calculated gesture of equality rather than deference. Welcome to LexCorp. I trust your journey from orbit was pleasant? Vader ignored the offered hand, studying Luthor through the expressionless mask with an intensity that felt like physical pressure. Lex Luthor, the mechanically altered voice carried tones of assessment and calculation. Records indicate you are Earth's preeminent human intellect, a self-made billionaire who built an empire through innovation and ruthless business acumen. You have attempted to kill Superman 17 times by my count, each attempt more sophisticated than the last, demonstrating admirable persistence in the face of repeated failure. The insult was delivered with such casual precision that Luthor felt his teeth grinding before forcing his expression back to neutral. You also served as President of the United States, using political power to advance anti-metahuman legislation before Superman exposed your corruption and forced your resignation. You see the Kryptonian as an existential threat to human sovereignty and have dedicated substantial resources to developing contingencies for his elimination. Your intelligence is thorough, Luthor replied, gesturing for Vader and his officer to sit. Neither moved. I assume you didn't risk Superman's attention to recite my Wikipedia page. What does the Galactic Empire want from Lex Luthor? Vader's respirator created a pause that felt deliberate, a psychological technique to establish control of the conversation's tempo. The Empire wants nothing from you, Mr. Luthor. We are here to offer you what you have sought unsuccessfully for 2 decades, the knowledge and technology to neutralize Superman permanently. The holographic display activated without anyone touching controls. Vader was doing it through telekinesis, Luthor realized, his scientific mind already racing with implications about force-based manipulation of electronic systems, and showed schematics of weapons that made Luthor's pulse quicken despite his legendary self-control. This is a plasma disruptor cannon, Vader explained, highlighting a weapon system pulled from Star Destroyer armaments. It fires coherent packets of superheated matter at relativistic velocities. Standard deployment is against capital ships, but scaled down and modified to emit radiation in frequencies that affect Kryptonian cellular structure, it could theoretically bypass Superman's invulnerability. Another schematic appeared. This is a molecular disintegration field generator. It doesn't rely on kinetic impact or thermal energy. It disrupts atomic bonds at the quantum level. Even Kryptonian tissue cannot maintain cohesion when its fundamental atomic structure is being actively dissolved. More weapons cycled through the display. Gravity well. Generators that could create localized singularities. Quantum destabilization fields that would make Superman's powers fluctuate unpredictably. Irradiation emitters tuned to frequencies beyond standard kryptonite, but potentially more effective. Each design represented years of research Luthor hadn't completed, approaches to the Superman problem that his earthbound physics hadn't suggested. Luthor's mind raced through possibilities, seeing not just anti-Superman applications, but broader implications for metahuman control, military superiority, and the reshaping of Earth's power structure around whoever controlled such technology. Theoretical effectiveness is meaningless without practical testing, he said carefully, recognizing a sales pitch when he encountered one. And I notice you're showing me weapons designed to kill, not capture or neutralize. Oh, that suggests your empire doesn't believe in half measures when dealing with superpowered threats. Vader inclined his head fractionally. The Jedi Order once numbered 10,000 warriors with abilities similar to Superman's invulnerability and Wonder Woman's combat prowess. The Empire eliminated them in a single night through coordinated strikes using overwhelming force and weapons designed specifically to counter their abilities. We do not believe in half measures because half measures allow enemies to survive and adapt. The Jedi were your enemies? Luthor asked, his analytical mind catching the implications. Force users like yourself, but opposed to your empire? The officer who had accompanied Vader, a woman with lieutenant's insignia and nervous eyes, spoke for the first time. The Jedi claimed to serve peace and justice but operated outside governmental authority, enforcing their moral code on the galaxy through superior power. They kidnapped Force-sensitive children for indoctrination into their order. They involved themselves in political disputes they didn't understand, prolonging conflicts that should have ended quickly. And when the Republic they claimed to serve became corrupt, they attempted to overthrow the legitimate government rather than work within legal systems to reform it. Her voice carried the conviction of someone reciting doctrine she genuinely believed. The Empire brought order to the chaos the Jedi's arrogance created. Luthor felt a surge of vindication so intense it was almost physical. Here, finally, was a civilization that recognized the danger of superpowered individuals operating without oversight, that understood godlike beings needed systematic control rather than trust in their personal morality. The Justice League faces similar issues, he said, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. They intervene in sovereign nations without permission. They make life-and-death decisions affecting millions based on their personal judgment. Superman could end wars, cure diseases, reshape civilization, but he chooses not to because interfering would violate some arbitrary principle he invented. Luther's hands clenched into fists. He has the power of a god and the mentality of a Kansas farmer. He holds humanity back from achieving our potential because he's afraid of what we might become without his benevolent supervision. Then we have common cause, Vader said, and Luther felt the hook being set even as he willingly bit down on it. The Empire offers you technology to level the playing field between baseline humans and metahuman threats. In exchange, we require access to Earth's manufacturing capabilities, raw materials to sustain our fleet, and political cover among your governments while we search for a method to return to our dimension. The Dark Lord leaned forward slightly. More importantly, we require allies who understand that power concentrated in individuals without institutional oversight inevitably leads to tyranny. The Justice League will oppose our presence on philosophical grounds. We need humans who recognize that Superman's benevolence today does not guarantee his benevolence tomorrow, and who are willing to take preventative measures against that possibility. Luther walked to the window, staring out at Metropolis where Superman's statue stood in Centennial Park, erected by grateful citizens who worship the alien as their savior. I've tried working within systems, he said quietly. I've used legal challenges, political pressure, public relations campaigns, all attempting to convince humanity that dependency on Superman makes us weaker, not stronger. But they love him. They see a god who chooses to protect rather than rule, and convince themselves that's virtue rather than condescension. He turned back to Vader. What you're offering is the ability to prove Earth doesn't need Superman, yet to demonstrate that human ingenuity and technology can match Kryptonian biology, to show that we're not helpless children requiring an alien's protection. His eyes hardened. I'll provide manufacturing access and political coordination. In exchange, I want full technical specifications for every weapon system you've shown me, training in their use, and a guarantee that when Superman responds to my using Imperial technology, your fleet will provide support. Unacceptable, Vader replied. And Luther felt a flash of anger before the Dark Lord continued. We will not provide direct military support against the Justice League until our strategic position is more secure. Engaging Superman in orbital combat serves neither our interests nor yours. We would likely lose, and you would be exposed as our ally before you've prepared adequate defenses. The respirator breathing filled the pause. Instead, we will provide you with manufacturing assistance and technical knowledge to build the weapons yourself, under LexCorp's name and authority. When Superman investigates, and he will, you can claim you reverse-engineered Imperial technology from orbital scans, a plausible cover story that maintains our deniability while giving you the tools you need. Vader's mask turned toward the Metropolis skyline. The goal is not to kill Superman immediately. It is to create uncertainty, to demonstrate that he is not invulnerable, to make both him and Earth's governments question whether his continued presence creates more problems than it solves. Luther considered the offer, paranoia warring with ambition. If Vader was manipulating him, that much was obvious. The Empire needed human allies and was using anti-Superman sentiment to recruit them. But the manipulation was so blatant it almost didn't matter, because the offer itself was genuine. Imperial technology represented a quantum leap in Luther's capabilities, regardless of the strings attached. And if the Empire wanted to use LexCorp as a stalking horse against the Justice League, that served Luther's interests perfectly. Let Vader think he was controlling the situation. Luther had built an empire by allowing people to underestimate him while he positioned pieces for inevitable betrayal. I'll need guarantees, Luther said. Technical specifications verified by my scientists, prototype weapons tested before full production, an absolute assurance that when this partnership inevitably becomes public, the Empire will acknowledge LexCorp as an ally rather than a dupe. Agreed, Vader extended his hand this time, and Luther shook it, feeling the mechanical grip that could crush human bones with casual pressure, restraining itself to normal handshake firmness. Lieutenant Kira will remain as our liaison, providing technical assistance and coordinating resource transfers. I trust LexCorp's discretion will prevent Justice League interference until our position is secure. Luther smiled with genuine warmth for the first time in the meeting. Batman already suspects I'm planning something. He suspects that constantly because I'm always planning something. But proving it is another matter. And by the time Superman realizes what we're building, It'll be too late for him to stop it without revealing his own fear of human advancement. He walked Vader and Kira back to their shuttle, mind already racing through manufacturing schedules and weapons testing protocols. One question, Lord Vader. Why approach me specifically? Earth has other brilliant scientists, other anti-metahuman activists, other resources you could have recruited. Vader paused at the shuttle's boarding ramp, his mask turning to stare at Luthor with uncomfortable intensity. Because you are willing to sacrifice anything to prove human superiority over alien power, the Dark Lord said quietly. You have funded research that killed thousands of test subjects. You have triggered conflicts that devastated cities. You have allied with beings of cosmic evil when it served your vendetta against Superman. That level of ruthless commitment is rare, Mr. Luthor. The Empire values it highly. He ascended into the shuttle without waiting for response, leaving Luthor alone on the rooftop as the vessel lifted off with technology that rendered it invisible to standard detection. Luthor stood in the wind, watching the shuttle's invisible trajectory through his quantum sensors, feeling a cold satisfaction spreading through his chest. Vader had tried to warn him, attempted to make Luthor recognize that he was being recruited specifically because his obsession made him controllable, predictable, exploitable. But the Dark Lord had made a critical error in judgment. Lex Luthor had spent 2 decades being used by everyone from government agencies to alien invaders to cosmic entities, always emerging with more knowledge and resources than he'd started with. The Empire thought they were recruiting a useful pawn in their conflict with Earth's heroes. What they'd actually done was give humanity's most dangerous mind access to technology that could reshape civilization. And when the dust settled, when the inevitable war between Imperial Order and Justice League chaos reached its conclusion, Lex Luthor would be positioned to offer Earth a third option. Human supremacy backed by Imperial technology, but answerable to human authority. Superman would fall. The Empire would be used and discarded. And Lex Luthor would finally prove what he'd always known, that humanity didn't need gods or emperors. They just needed the will to take power for themselves. Barry Allen moved through the Speed Force like a comet, racing through dimensions of pure kinetic energy. The universe around him frozen in amber, while he existed in the space between seconds. The Flash's connection to the extra-dimensional energy field that powered all speedsters allowed him to perceive reality at temporal resolutions that made nanoseconds feel like hours. And right now, every instinct honed by years of protecting Central City was screaming that something felt wrong about the orbital situation. Superman had returned from the Watchtower meeting with Vader looking troubled. Batman had disappeared into his cave with research to conduct. And Wonder Woman was currently on Themyscira, consulting with the gods about dimensional incursions. The Justice League's response to the Imperial fleet had been measured, diplomatic, and patient, all the things Barry appreciated about his teammates, but also recognized as potential weaknesses when facing opponents who might exploit goodwill for strategic advantage. So he was doing what he did best, investigating at speeds that made surveillance impossible and gathering information faster than enemies could hide it. The Flash had spent the last subjective hour, 3 actual seconds by normal time, racing across Metropolis's rooftops, through government buildings, and around LexCorp Tower specifically, because if anyone on Earth was going to make a deal with authoritarian space fascists, it would be Lex Luthor. What Barry had discovered made his stomach sink, even as his speed increased with agitation. Trace radiation signatures on Luthor's rooftop landing pad, matching the energy output of Imperial shuttle engines. SAS quantum communication protocols being integrated into LexCorp's satellite network using encryption algorithms that bore no resemblance to Earth-based cryptography. And most damningly, shipments of rare earth metals and superconductor materials being redirected from LexCorp's manufacturing facilities to offshore platforms that hadn't existed 48 hours ago. Barry phased through LexCorp Tower's exterior wall, his molecules vibrating at frequencies that let him pass through solid matter like a ghost, and materialized inside Luthor's private laboratory 70 stories above street level. From the Speed Force's perspective, the room was a snapshot frozen in time. Luthor, standing at his holographic display studying what looked like Star Destroyer schematics, a Mercy Graves reaching for a weapon in response to detecting Barry's temporal disruption, and Lieutenant Kira, the Imperial officer Barry had seen on the watchtower, working at a computer terminal surrounded by technology that was definitely not LexCorp's standard issue. The Flash had perhaps 5 seconds of subjective time before the room's occupants could react to his presence. He used 3 of those seconds to photograph everything with his cowl's microcameras, upload the data to Justice League servers, and scan through the computer files Kira was accessing. What he found in those files made his blood run cold, despite moving fast enough to generate friction heat. Weapons specifications designed specifically to counter Kryptonian physiology. Radiation emitters tuned to frequencies that would bypass Superman's invulnerability. Molecular disruptors that could theoretically dissolve Kryptonian tissue. Gravity manipulation technology that could create localized red sun conditions. More disturbing were the tactical assessments. Detailed analysis of every Justice League member's powers and potential weaknesses, movement patterns tracked through orbital surveillance, and contingency plans for neutralizing Earth's defenders that bore the signature of military intelligence far more sophisticated than anything Luthor could have developed alone. The Empire wasn't just seeking asylum on Earth. They were preparing for war against the Justice League while using Luthor as their proxy to build the weapons they'd need. Barry felt time beginning to reassert itself as his Speed Force connection fluctuated. He could maintain subjective temporal displacement for only so long before physics demanded equilibrium. He had perhaps 2 subjective seconds remaining before Luthor's security systems and Kira's reactions caught up to his presence. He used the first second to plant microscopic trackers on the Imperial technology, devices smaller than dust motes that would broadcast locations and data transmissions to Justice League monitoring systems. The second, and Barry always appreciated the linguistic absurdity of that phrase, was spent leaving a calling card, because subtlety wasn't really the Flash's strong suit, and he wanted Luthor to know that his alliance with space Nazis hadn't gone unnoticed. Time snapped back to normal speed like a rubber band released. Mercy's weapon cleared its holster but found no target. Kira spun toward where she'd detected temporal distortion, only to find empty air. Luthor's eyes widened as he saw the message Barry had written across his holographic display in characters formed from displaced photons. "Working with dictators won't end well. We need to talk." The Flash. The speedster was already gone, racing back toward Central City at velocities that turned the landscape into impressionist paintings of light and color. But he felt a grim satisfaction at having disrupted whatever plan Luthor and the Empire were hatching. The evidence was now in Justice League hands. Superman would be disappointed but not surprised. Batman would say, "I told you so," in the most irritating way possible. And Wonder Woman would probably want to arrest Luthor immediately, which was why Barry needed to get ahead of this before the situation escalated into something that ended with orbital bombardment and Amazonian warriors storming LexCorp. Barry materialized in the Watchtower's main conference room, where Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman were already assembled. Batman had apparently summoned them the moment Barry's uploaded data hit League servers. The Kryptonian's expression was grave, blue eyes troubled in ways that reminded Barry of how Clark looked when he was writing obituaries for the Daily Planet. "Luthor's working with them," Superman said, and it wasn't a question. "He's providing them with resources and manufacturing capability in exchange for anti-Kryptonian weapons technology." He pulled up the schematics Barry had photographed, or his jaw tightening as he studied weapons designed specifically to kill him. "Some of these designs, they're sophisticated, Barry, more advanced than anything Luthor's developed on his own. If he actually builds these, they might work." "Of course they'll work," Batman's voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd already run the calculations. The Empire conquered millions of worlds. They've faced every type of superpowered threat imaginable and developed systematic approaches to neutralizing them. These weapons represent millennia of accumulated knowledge about killing beings with abilities beyond standard physics. He highlighted specific components. "This radiation emitter uses principles we haven't discovered yet. This molecular disruptor operates on quantum mechanics our best physicists consider theoretical. This gravity well generator could create localized singularities that would affect even you, Clark." Bruce's expression darkened further. "And that's just the weapons we know about. If Vader's giving Luthor this much technology, imagine what he's keeping in reserve." Wonder Woman's hand rested on her sword hilt, divine fury radiating from her like heat from a forge. Then we act now, before Luthor can manufacture these weapons. We arrest him for collusion with hostile forces, confiscate the Imperial technology, and present the Empire with an ultimatum. Cease all contact with Earth's populations or face immediate military action. She looked at Superman. You wanted to give them a chance, Clark. You offered asylum and assistance finding their way home. They've responded by recruiting your greatest enemy and providing him with weapons designed to kill you. How much more evidence do you need that they cannot be trusted? Barry watched his teammates argue, feeling the familiar tension that arose whenever the Trinity's philosophies collided. Superman believed in redemption and second chances, in assuming good faith until proven otherwise. Batman prepared for betrayal as a matter of course, assumed everyone would eventually become an enemy, and built contingencies accordingly. Wonder Woman balanced between them, willing to offer honor to those who showed honor, but equally willing to cut down threats with Warrior's pragmatism when peace proved impossible. The problem was that all three approaches had merit in this situation, and choosing wrong could result in either unnecessary war or being unprepared when war came anyway. We can't arrest Luthor based on this evidence, Barry interjected, hating that he was taking a position that would frustrate Diana. Everything I photographed shows him receiving information and making plans. We didn't catch him actually building banned weapons or violating any specific laws. His lawyers would have him released in hours, and we'd look like we're persecuting a private citizen for exercising free association. He pulled up relevant legal precedents. Remember when he tried to have us arrested for entering LexCorp property without warrants? Same principle applies here. We need him to actually commit a crime before we can act. And so far, talking to the Empire isn't illegal. Then we change the law, Wonder Woman countered. Or the United Nations can declare the Imperial fleet a hostile presence and make collaboration with them an act of treason. Earth's governments will support such measures once they understand the threat. Superman shook his head slowly. And then we've proven Vader right about Earth being unable to coexist peacefully with the Empire. We've escalated from diplomatic tension to legal warfare, which pushes them closer to the very authoritarianism we're trying to prevent them from imposing. He stood, walking to the viewport overlooking Earth. Vader's strategy is becoming clear. He can't beat us militarily, so he's dividing us politically. He recruits Luthor, knowing we'll respond with legal pressure. That drives other humans who fear metahuman power into the Empire's arms. Or soon we're facing a coalition of Earth governments and corporations allied with Imperial forces against the Justice League, and we're the ones who look like the unreasonable aggressors. Batman's fingers steepled in the gesture that meant he was calculating multiple scenarios simultaneously. Luthor's not the only contact they're making. My monitoring systems detected a second Imperial shuttle landing at Belle Reve Penitentiary 6 hours ago. Amanda Waller met with Imperial intelligence officers for approximately 90 minutes before they departed. He pulled up satellite imagery showing the meeting. Waller controls Task Force X and has been seeking anti-metahuman countermeasures for years. If the Empire is offering her the same technology they gave Luthor, we're looking at the U.S., a government acquiring weapons designed to kill League members, all under the cover of national security. Waller, Superman's voice carried barely restrained anger. Of course she'd work with them. She's been trying to put explosive collars on us since the day we formed the League. He turned to face Batman. You've worked with her before, Bruce. Can you talk to her? Make her understand that allying with an authoritarian empire against Earth's heroes is exactly the kind of short-term thinking that leads to long-term disaster? Batman's expression suggested he found that possibility unlikely, but not impossible. I can try. Waller respects power and preparation. If I approach her with evidence that the Empire will betray any alliance once they're secure, she might listen. But she's paranoid enough to assume I'm trying to eliminate competition for superhuman oversight rather than genuinely warning her about threats. Barry felt the familiar frustration of watching problems multiply faster than solutions could address them. Okay, so we've got Luthor building anti-Superman weapons, Waller acquiring metahuman countermeasures, and the Empire systematically recruiting everyone who's afraid of or angry at the Justice League. What's their endgame here? They can't actually think they can control Earth even with human allies, right? The question hung in the air until Martian Manhunter materialized through the Watchtower's wall, his expression troubled in ways that made everyone tense. I have been monitoring the psychic resonance across Earth's population, John said quietly. The Empire's presence is creating divisions I have not sensed since the days before the Justice League's formation. Humans who see us as protectors are becoming more vocal in defending our authority. Humans who fear metahuman power are using the Empire's arrival as evidence that we attract dangerous attention. And underneath both positions, I sense something darker. The Martian's eyes glowed red, with barely contained concern. Someone is amplifying these divisions telepathically. Not controlling thoughts directly, that would be detectable, but subtly encouraging existing fears and resentments, making them feel more urgent, more justified. The technique is sophisticated, beyond anything human telepaths could accomplish. He turned to Superman. I believe Darkseid is involved. The psychic signature carries traces of apocalyptic methodology. The Empire may not be working alone in their effort to divide Earth's defenders from its population. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Barry felt his connection to the Speed Force fluctuating with stress, temporal energy crackling around his form in yellow lightning. If Darkseid was involved, this had already escalated beyond simple imperial opportunism into cosmic-scale manipulation. That changes everything, Wonder Woman stated, hand now fully gripping her sword hilt. If Apocalypse is supporting the Empire's infiltration of Earth, we're not facing refugee forces seeking asylum. We're facing the opening moves of Darkseid's next invasion attempt. We must act immediately. Batman raised a hand, forestalling her reaction. If we act without proof, we're attacking based on John's telepathic impressions and circumstantial evidence. That plays directly into Darkseid's strategy, making us look like aggressive tyrants who assault innocent refugees based on paranoid suspicion. He pulled up tactical displays showing the Star Destroyer's current positions. We need hard evidence of Empire-Apocalypse collaboration before we can justify military action. Otherwise, we risk starting a war on multiple fronts. Imperial fleet, Earth governments allied with them, and Darkseid's forces all simultaneously. Then I'll get you evidence, Barry said, Speed Force energy building around him like a storm preparing to break. I can phase through the Star Destroyer's hulls, access their computers, and search for communications with Apocalypse faster than their security systems can detect. If Vader's working with Darkseid, there will be records. Superman's expression showed concern. Barry, these are military vessels from a civilization that's been conquering galaxies for millennia. They'll have countermeasures against infiltration, potentially lethal ones. I can't ask you to risk. You're not asking, Clark. I'm volunteering. The Flash grinned with the reckless confidence that had gotten him into and out of countless impossible situations. Besides, I'm the only one who can move fast enough to search their entire fleet before they realize I'm there. Batman's stealth is good, but Imperial sensors would eventually detect him. You'd trigger every alarm by just existing near them. Diana's approach is more, kick down the door and demand answers. This is a job for Speed, and Speed is what I do. The decision made, or Barry prepared to phase into the Speed Force and race toward orbital velocities when Batman's hand on his shoulder stopped him. If you find evidence of Darkseid's involvement, Bruce said quietly, don't engage. Don't attempt to sabotage anything. Just gather information and return. His grip tightened fractionally. The Empire has already proven they'll exploit any aggressive action we take. If you're caught infiltrating their ships, they can claim the Justice League attacked first, and we lose whatever moral authority we still have in Earth's eyes. Barry nodded understanding, then became lightning and vanished, his consciousness merging with the Speed Force as he accelerated through the Watchtower's hull and into the vacuum of space beyond. From the Speed Force's perspective, the Star Destroyers hung in orbit like sculptures carved from frozen time, their running lights static points of illumination against Earth's slowly rotating bulk. Barry phased through the Devastator's hull molecular structure, his vibrating form passing between atoms like smoke through a screen, and materialized inside the command ship's data core. The room was a cathedral of Imperial information systems, databanks storing tactical information from millions of worlds, communication logs spanning decades of conquest, and if Barry's suspicions were correct, evidence of contact with Apocalypse that would justify Justice League intervention. He had perhaps 30 subjective seconds before temporal paradox forced him to return to normal time. He'd need every one of them to search a database that contained more information than Earth's entire internet. The Flash's hands became blurs across the Imperial computer interfaces, his enhanced perception allowing him to process data faster than the systems could display it. He found tactical assessments of the Justice League, detailed, accurate, disturbing in their completeness. He found communications with Luthor and Waller confirming their alliances. He found Vader's personal logs discussing strategy for dividing Earth's defenders from its population. But he didn't find what he was looking for. No communication with Apocalypse, no evidence of Darkseid's involvement, nothing that would prove the Empire was working with Earth's greatest enemy. The absence of evidence was almost more troubling than its presence would have been. Or either the Empire wasn't collaborating with Darkseid, which meant John's telepathic impressions were wrong, or the evidence was hidden so deeply that even Barry's speed couldn't locate it in the time available. Then, with 5 subjective seconds remaining, Barry found something that made his blood freeze despite the friction heat his speed was generating. A communication log buried in triple encrypted files marked for Vader's eyes only. The message was brief, written in high galactic standard that the Watchtower's translation matrix rendered into English. Lord of Apocalypse acknowledges Imperial presence. Proposes coordination of strategic interests. Meeting requested through dimensional gateway coordinates attached. See Omega signature verified authentic. The timestamp showed the message had been received 6 hours ago, shortly after Vader's meeting with Luthor. The Empire hadn't just been contacted by Darkseid. They'd been invited to negotiate an alliance, and based on the response filed in Vader's logs, the Dark Lord had accepted. Barry's time ran out. The Speed Force released him back into normal temporal flow, and he felt Imperial security systems suddenly detecting his presence, alarms beginning to wail as stormtroopers mobilized and Vader's force awareness zeroed in on the infiltrator in his data core. The Flash became lightning again, phasing through deck plates and hull armor, racing back toward Earth as TIE fighters scrambled to pursue something moving faster than their targeting computers could track. He'd gotten what he came for, but the knowledge felt like poison in his mind. The Empire and Darkseid were planning coordination. Earth's defenders were being systematically isolated from their own population. And the Justice League's next move would determine whether they could stop both threats before the galaxy's most ruthless empire and the universe's most terrible god achieved whatever coordination of strategic interests they'd negotiated. Barry hoped it would be enough. He feared it wouldn't. But at least now they knew. And knowing was half the battle. The other half was figuring out how to fight enemies on multiple fronts without becoming the tyrants they were trying to prevent. The Batcave's main computer array blazed with holographic displays as Bruce Wayne analyzed the data Flash had extracted from the Devastator, each screen showing a different facet of the nightmare scenario unfolding in Earth's orbit. The evidence was irrefutable. Vader had received communication from Apocalypse and accepted a meeting to discuss coordination of strategic interests. The dimensional gateway coordinates pointed to a location in deep space beyond Pluto's orbit, far from Earth's defensive perimeter where Darkseid could send emissaries without triggering immediate Justice League response. The meeting was scheduled for 18 hours from now, which gave Batman barely enough time to formulate a strategy that wouldn't result in galactic war, planetary invasion, or both simultaneously. Alfred stood behind him with tea that had long since grown cold. The butler's practiced composure showing cracks as he absorbed the implications of what the screens displayed. "Yes, Master Bruce," Alfred said quietly. "If I'm understanding correctly, the Galactic Empire, a regime that destroys planets and crushes freedom across millions of systems, is negotiating an alliance with Darkseid, a god who seeks to eliminate free will across all existence through the anti-life equation. And they're doing this while recruiting Lex Luthor and Amanda Waller to build weapons against the Justice League." He set down the tea with more force than strictly necessary. "I hesitate to say this, but have you considered that Earth might genuinely be facing a threat that requires more direct action than detective work and contingency planning?" Bruce's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away from the screens. "Direct action plays into their strategy, Alfred. They want us to attack preemptively, to prove we're the aggressive tyrants they're painting us as to Earth's governments. Vader's smart enough to know he can't beat us militarily, so he's forcing us into a position where military victory becomes political defeat." He pulled up news feeds showing global reaction to the Imperial fleet's presence. CNN ran debates about metahuman accountability. Fox News hosted panels discussing whether the Justice League had the authority to dictate Earth's foreign policy with extraterrestrial civilizations. Social media exploded with hashtags both supporting and condemning Superman's handling of the situation. Every hour that passed saw Earth's population becoming more divided about whether their superhuman defenders represented protection or threat. The court of public opinion has always been fickle, sir, Alfred observed. See, you face similar challenges in Gotham. Criminals claiming you're a vigilante operating outside the law, politicians demanding Batman's arrest, citizens questioning whether a masked man in armor represents justice or terror. He met Bruce's eyes in the reflection on the screen. Yet you've continued operating because you know Gotham needs the Batman regardless of whether it wants him. Perhaps Earth needs the Justice League to make hard choices regardless of political consequences. Bruce finally turned to face his oldest friend and father figure. The difference is that I'm one man in one city, Alfred. If Gotham decides it doesn't want Batman, I can disappear, and the city continues functioning. If Earth decides it doesn't want the Justice League, and we ignore that decision to pursue what we think is right, we become exactly what Vader claims we are. Superpowered beings imposing our will on populations too weak to resist us. The philosophical debate was interrupted by the Batcomputer's proximity alarm. Someone was approaching the cave through the vehicle entrance. Someone moving fast enough that the sensors barely registered their passage before they were already inside. Barry Allen materialized in a crackle of yellow lightning, breathing hard despite speedster metabolism that should have rendered physical exhaustion impossible. His expression carried urgency that made Bruce's tactical mind shift immediately into crisis mode. "We've got a problem," Barry said without preamble. "I ran a secondary analysis on the data I pulled from Imperial systems. Yet the communication from Apocalypse wasn't just a meeting request. It included technical specifications for something called a dimensional anchor. Darkseid's offering the Empire technology that would let them permanently stabilize their presence in our dimension." Bruce felt cold calculation spreading through his mind, suppressing the emotional response that wanted to rage at the implications. Which means if the Empire accepts Darkseid's offer, they're no longer stranded refugees seeking a way home. They become permanent residents with the technological capability to bring more Imperial forces through dimensional gateways. He pulled up stellar cartography showing the meeting coordinates. And Darkseid's not just recruiting allies. He's importing an entire authoritarian empire into our universe to help him conquer it. Alfred's teacup rattled against its saucer. Good Lord. An alliance between Apocalypse and the Galactic Empire would give Darkseid access to Imperial military doctrine, hyperspace technology, and the systematic conquest methodology of a civilization that subjugated millions of worlds. And it would give the Empire access to boom tube technology, mother boxes, and Darkseid's Omega powers. Together, they would be unstoppable. Not unstoppable, Bruce corrected, fingers already flying across the keyboard as he began formulating countermeasures. But significantly more dangerous than either threat individually. We need to prevent that meeting from happening or ensure it fails. He activated the Justice League Emergency Communication Network. "Barry, get everyone to the Watchtower immediately. Superman, Wonder Woman, John, Hal, everyone. We're moving the timetable up." Barry nodded and vanished in another lightning flash, leaving Bruce alone with Alfred and the weight of decisions that would determine Earth's fate. The butler approached quietly, placing a hand on Bruce's shoulder. "You're planning something that will likely make you Earth's most wanted man, aren't you, sir?" Bruce allowed himself a thin smile. "When am I not? But yes, this one's going to be particularly controversial." Within 20 minutes, the Justice League's core members assembled in the Watchtower's war room, a section of the station designed specifically for tactical planning against cosmic-level threats. Superman stood at the head of the table looking more troubled than Bruce had seen him since the Doomsday Crisis. Wonder Woman's hand never left her sword hilt, divine fury barely restrained behind Olympian discipline. Green Lantern. Hal Jordan constructed nervous patterns with his ring, emerald energy forming and dissolving weapon systems in unconscious displays of anxiety. Martian Manhunter hovered slightly above his chair, telepathic awareness extended to monitor the room for any psychic intrusion. Cyborg's technological consciousness interfaced with the Watchtower's systems, running probability calculations on every scenario Bruce might propose. And Flash vibrated in place, kinetic energy bleeding off as yellow lightning that scorched the floor beneath his feet. Batman stood before them and laid out the situation with characteristic directness. The Empire is meeting with Apocalypse representatives in 18 hours. Darkseid is offering them dimensional anchor technology that would let them establish permanent presence in our universe. In exchange, they're likely providing Imperial military knowledge and serving as Darkseid's vanguard for conquering Earth. He pulled up the intercepted communications. If this alliance forms, we're facing coordinated assault from both forces. Boom tubes bringing parademons and Imperial stormtroopers simultaneously, Omega beams supported by turbo-laser bombardment, Darkseid's god-level powers backed by Star Destroyer fleets. Yet the Empire gains a way to stay. Apocalypse gains systematic military doctrine, and Earth gets crushed between them. Then we interrupt the meeting, Wonder Woman said immediately, her warrior's pragmatism cutting through to the obvious solution. We deploy and force to the coordinates, destroy any Apocalyptian vessels present, and make it clear to Vader that negotiating with Darkseid means war with the Justice League. Hal nodded agreement, Ring already forming combat constructs. I can have Green Lantern Corps back up here in hours. We bring enough power to make the Empire think twice about this alliance. Superman raised a hand, forestalling the aggressive response. And when we attack Imperial forces who are technically just having a conversation with Apocalypse representatives, what message does that send? We become the aggressors. We prove Vader's narrative that Earth's heroes won't allow peaceful coexistence. We drive the Empire completely into Darkseid's arms because we've demonstrated we'll attack them regardless of their actions. Their action is negotiating with a cosmic tyrant who wants to eliminate free will across the universe. Diana's voice carried the force of divine wrath. Clark, your compassion is admirable, but there are limits to how much benefit of the doubt we can extend to forces that openly discuss coordination with Darkseid. At what point does diplomatic caution become suicidal naivety? The tension in the room spiked as Superman and Wonder Woman's fundamental philosophies clashed. Hope versus pragmatism, redemption versus preemption. The assumption of good faith versus the preparation for betrayal. Bruce had seen this argument play out countless times in different contexts, and he knew that left unresolved, it would paralyze the League at precisely the moment they needed decisive action. There's a third option, Batman said, pulling their attention back to him. We don't attack the meeting directly. Instead, we infiltrate it. I go alone, stealth insertion, and gather intelligence on what Darkseid is actually offering and what Vader intends to accept. If they're genuinely planning coordinated conquest, we'll have proof that justifies military response. If there's any possibility of driving a wedge between them, exploiting the fact that both the Empire and Apocalypse are authoritarian regimes that won't easily share power, we preserve that option. He met each hero's eyes in turn. More importantly, if I'm caught, the Empire can't claim the entire Justice League attacked. They can say Batman acted as a rogue agent, which maintains plausible deniability and doesn't force them into all-out war. Absolutely not. Superman's voice carried the firmness of someone who'd watched too many friends risk themselves on solo missions. Bruce, you're talking about infiltrating a meeting between a Dark Lord of the Sith and emissaries from Apocalypse. If either side detects you, you'll be captured or killed before we could mount a rescue. You don't have powers, you can't survive in hard vacuum without your suit, and your stealth technology hasn't been tested against Imperial or Apocalyptian detection systems. Clark stepped forward. If anyone goes on this mission, it should be John. He can phase through solid matter, turn invisible, and telepathically mask his presence. He's designed for this kind of reconnaissance. Martian Manhunter shook his head slowly. Darkseid's forces include telepaths and Mother Box technology that can detect Martian phasing. I would be discovered within minutes. His red eyes glowed with concern. Batman's assessment is correct. He is our best option for infiltration despite the risks. But Clark is also correct that the danger is extreme. Perhaps we should consider whether gathering this intelligence is worth the potential cost. Bruce had anticipated this objection and had his counter-argument prepared. The cost of not knowing what they're planning is higher than the risk to one League member. If the Empire and Apocalypse coordinate their strategies without our knowledge, we're fighting blind against enemies who've had time to prepare for every counter we might deploy. I need to know what Darkseid is offering, what Vader is demanding in exchange, and whether there are fault lines in their alliance we can exploit. I'm going with you, Hal Jordan said firmly, constructs solidifying into weapons configurations. Green Lantern stealth tech can mask both of us, and if things go south, we'll need firepower to fight our way out. No arguments, Batman. You don't get to play lone wolf on a mission this important. Bruce wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed that adding more people increased the chance of detection. But Hal's expression brooked no disagreement. The Green Lantern had a point. If Batman was captured, on having extraction capability might mean the difference between intelligence coup and diplomatic disaster. Fine, Bruce conceded, but you follow my lead. No heroic charges, no last-minute constructs that light up their sensors. We observe, record, and leave. Clear? Wonder Woman drew her sword, divine metal singing as it cleared the scabbard. While you gather intelligence, I will prepare for war. If your mission fails, or if you confirm they're planning coordinated assault, Earth must be ready to defend itself. She looked at Superman. I know you want to believe the Empire can be reasoned with, but I have lived through millennia of empires. They do not change their nature through gentle persuasion. They change when they encounter force greater than their own. Diana's eyes blazed with Olympian fire. REI will return to Themyscira and mobilize the Amazon forces. I will contact Atlantis and request Aquaman's armies stand ready. And I will pray to Zeus that your diplomatic approach succeeds, because if it fails, the war that follows will reshape this world in blood and fire. Superman's expression showed the weight of leadership pressing down on shoulders that could lift planets, but struggled with the burden of impossible choices. Do what you have to, Diana, but understand that mobilizing for war while we're still attempting diplomacy sends mixed messages that could provoke the very conflict we're trying to prevent. He turned to Batman and Green Lantern. You have 12 hours before the meeting. That gives you time to prepare and still arrive early enough to establish observation positions. You bring back proof one way or another, either that the Empire can be negotiated with, or that we need to remove them from our solar system by force. Clark's voice hardened with a determination that reminded everyone why he led the League, despite Batman's superior tactical mind. But if you're captured, if this mission compromises our position, I will hold both of you responsible for starting a war that could have been prevented through patience. The meeting adjourned with the League splitting into their assigned tasks. Wonder Woman vanished in a shimmer of divine light, teleporting directly to Themyscira to rally her sisters. Cyborg remained at the Watchtower, fortifying its defenses and preparing weapon systems for potential orbital combat. Martian Manhunter extended his telepathic awareness across Earth, monitoring for any psychic manipulation that might indicate Darkseid was already influencing the population. Flash became a blur of yellow lightning, racing across the globe to warn other heroes, the Teen Titans, Justice Society, independent operators, that a crisis was developing and they needed to be ready for deployment on short notice. And Superman stood alone in the Watchtower's observation deck, staring down at Earth while struggling with the fundamental question that had plagued every leader throughout history. When did justified caution become dangerous hesitation? In the Batcave, Bruce Wayne prepared for the most dangerous infiltration mission of his career. The stealth suit came first. Armor incorporating every detection countermeasure technology Wayne Enterprises had developed over decades of Batman operations. Thermoptic camouflage to defeat infrared sensors. EM shielding against electromagnetic detection. Sound dampeners to eliminate acoustic signatures. Molecular bonding weave that could resist everything from blaster fire to lightsaber strikes for approximately 2.3 seconds before catastrophic failure. It wasn't much protection against the threats he'd face, but it was better than nothing. The recording equipment came next. Micro cameras and audio pickups small enough to avoid detection even by Imperial scanners, with quantum-encrypted transmission capability that would send data back to the Watchtower in real time, even if he was captured or killed. Alfred helped him into the armor with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd performed this ritual thousands of times, though his expression carried more concern than usual. You're essentially walking into a meeting between space Nazis and literal gods of evil. armed with nothing but clever gadgets and tactical planning, the butler observed dryly. I don't suppose I could convince you to at least bring Superman as backup. Bruce shook his head. Clark's presence would be detected immediately. Kryptonian physiology registers on scans like a miniature sun. This has to be stealth insertion, Alfred. Quick, quiet, invisible. He checked the suit's systems one final time. Besides, if something goes wrong and I don't come back, the League needs their heavy hitters ready for the war that follows. Superman, Diana, John, they're Earth's last line of defense if the Empire and Apocalypse actually coordinate their assault. And what am I supposed to tell Master Dick if you get yourself killed playing spy against cosmic threats? Alfred's voice carried the faintest tremor, the closest the unflappable butler came to showing fear. That you died gathering intelligence that could have been obtained through less suicidal means? Bruce turned to face the man who'd raised him, who'd stood beside him through every dark crusade and impossible mission for 3 decades. Tell him I did what I always do, whatever was necessary to protect the people I care about. Tell him Gotham needs a new Batman if I don't return. And tell him. Bruce paused, struggling with emotions he rarely acknowledged. Tell him I was proud of everything he became, even when I couldn't say it out loud. Alfred's eyes glistened behind his glasses. You'll tell him yourself when you return, sir. You always do. The butler straightened Bruce's cape with unnecessary precision, a gesture of affection disguised as professional duty. The Batplane is prepared for orbital insertion. Master Jordan is waiting at the rendezvous coordinates. And Master Bruce? Alfred met his eyes. Do try not to start an intergalactic war. The dry cleaning bills would be astronomical. Despite everything, Bruce felt a slight smile tugging at his lips. No promises, Alfred, but I'll do my best. He turned toward the Batplane, cape swirling behind him, already running through tactical scenarios in his mind. The meeting with Darkseid would reveal whether the Empire could be salvaged as potential allies against cosmic threats, or whether they represented a threat equal to Apocalypse itself. Either way, the next 12 hours would determine Earth's fate. And Batman intended to ensure that when the crisis came, and it would come, the Justice League had every advantage that preparation, intelligence, and tactical brilliance could provide. Because that's what Batman did. He turned impossible situations into survivable ones through sheer determination and refusal to accept defeat. Even against Sith Lords and Dark Gods. Even when the odds suggested suicide. Even when the cost might be everything he'd built. Because Earth needed the Dark Knight's shadows as much as it needed Superman's light. And Bruce Wayne had never been one to disappoint when the world needed saving. The coordinates Darkseid had provided existed in a region of space where reality itself seemed to thin, where the fabric of dimensions pressed close enough together that beings of sufficient power could tear through from one universe to another. Batman's stealth insertion craft, a modified Javelin shuttle incorporating both Wayne Enterprises technology and appropriated New God stealth systems from previous Apocalypse encounters, drifted through the void beyond Pluto's orbit with all systems running on passive mode. Beside him in the cramped cockpit, Hal Jordan maintained a Green Lantern construct around both the ship and themselves, bending light and energy signatures away from any potential sensors. The Emerald Cocoon made Batman's tactical systems almost useless, but it also rendered them effectively invisible to everything except the most sophisticated detection grids, which meant they had perhaps a 40% chance of remaining undetected when Imperial and Apocalyptian forces arrived. Batman had worked with worse odds. I'm reading spatial distortion building at the coordinates, Hal reported, his ring projecting holographic data that showed reality beginning to ripple like water disturbed by an unseen hand. Whatever's coming through, it's big. Multiple signatures, high energy output, and... He paused, ring glowing brighter as it analyzed phenomena beyond standard physics. Bruce, one of those signatures is registering as pure entropy, like reality itself is dying around it. That's gotta be Apocalyptian in origin. Nothing else reads that wrong. Batman filed the information away, you watching through passive optical sensors as the first boom tube opened with a sound that shouldn't exist in vacuum, but somehow resonated through their hull anyway. A thunderclap of tortured dimensions screaming at being violated. Through the circular gateway emerged vessels that made even Batman's carefully controlled breathing hitch with recognition. Apocalyptian warships, smaller than star destroyers, but radiating malevolence that was almost palpable even at this distance. Their hulls covered in architecture that seemed designed by beings who found beauty in suffering. Behind them came the emissaries themselves, three figures standing on a platform of solid energy that ignored physics and moved through hard vacuum as if it were merely another form of atmosphere. The central figure towered 3 meters tall, or skin like cracked volcanic rock, eyes burning with fire that had consumed galaxies. Not Darkseid himself. The Dark God rarely left Apocalypse for mere negotiations, but one of his Furies, beings who served as the tyrant's hands when he chose not to dirty his own with mortal business. Granny Goodness, Batman identified, pulling up files from Justice League encounters with Apocalypse. Darkseid's chief torturer and trainer of his Parademon armies. If he sent her, he's taking this negotiation seriously. Hal's constructs flickered with barely suppressed aggression. That's the thing that runs the orphanages where Darkseid's people brainwash kidnapped children into becoming his soldiers. I fought her twice, nearly died both times. The Green Lantern's ring blazed brighter. We should hit her now, Bruce. Take out the Apocalyptian delegation before the Empire arrives. Prevent this alliance from even starting. Batman's hand moved to Hal's arm, restraining him. And then we prove to Vader that Earth's heroes attack without provocation, drive him completely into Darkseid's arms out of necessity rather than choice, and start a war on terms our enemies chose rather than we dictated. We observe, Hal. That's the mission. Space rippled again. Different signature this time. Hyperspace rather than dimensional transit. Imperial technology rather than new god physics. The Star Destroyer. Devastator merged from the distortion with the precise military timing that characterized everything about the Empire's operations. Unlike the other 3 Star Destroyers that remained in Earth orbit, this vessel came alone, are accompanied only by a squadron of TIE fighters that moved in formation so perfect it looked computer-generated. The warship oriented itself toward the Apocalyptian vessels with weapons powered but not targeting, a statement that the Empire came prepared for treachery but willing to negotiate in good faith. From the Devastator's hangar bay, a Lambda-class shuttle launched, carrying what Batman's passive sensors identified as minimal crew. Vader was coming to this meeting with almost no protection, demonstrating either profound confidence or calculated vulnerability designed to earn trust. The 2 delegations met in the space between their vessels, energy fields provided by both sides creating a pocket of breathable atmosphere, held together by technology and dark magic, working in uncomfortable harmony. Batman activated the Javelin's long-range audio pickups, sophisticated enough to detect vibrations in the energy fields and reconstruct conversation from molecular disturbances. Hal's ring added its own sensors, Owen technology combining with Earth ingenuity to give them perfect surveillance of a meeting that would determine whether Earth faced 1 cosmic threat or 2. Lord Vader, Granny Goodness's voice carried the false sweetness of poisoned honey, maternal tones wrapped around cruelty that had broken thousands of children into weapons. Darkseid extends his greetings to the Galactic Empire. It is rare indeed that forces of order and discipline arrive in our chaotic universe. The Lord of Apocalypse believes we may have much to offer each other. Vader stood with characteristic imposing stillness, his mechanical breathing creating rhythm in the conversation like a metronome of menace. Greetings, Goodness. I confess curiosity about Apocalypse's interest in the Empire. Your master rules a single world while we govern millions of systems. What could Darkseid possibly offer that an interstellar civilization would require? The question was calculated provocation, Batman recognized, establishing negotiating position by implying Apocalypse needed the Empire more than the Empire needed Apocalypse. Granny's smile showed too many teeth. Why, the one thing your Empire currently lacks, Lord Vader: permanence in this dimension. You are refugees, stranded in a universe not your own, dependent on the mercy of beings you cannot defeat through military force. Darkseid offers you the means to stabilize your presence, to bring more Imperial forces through dimensional gateways, to establish in this reality the same dominance you enjoyed in your own galaxy. Batman watched through passive optics as one of Granny's attendants, a creature that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts of various species and tortured into functionality, presented a holographic display showing technical specifications. "This is a dimensional anchor," Granny explained, with the enthusiasm of someone offering candy to children before leading them to torture chambers. "New God technology that can permanently stabilize interdimensional rifts, allowing sustained transit between realities. With this device, your empire could summon reinforcements from your home galaxy, establish supply lines that would sustain your fleet indefinitely, and transform from temporary refugees into permanent residents of our universe." The implications hung in vacuum like poison gas, waiting to ignite. An empire capable of bringing unlimited reinforcements would be unstoppable by any force Earth could muster. "In exchange for what?" Vader asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer but wanted it stated explicitly. Granny's maternal facade dropped, replaced by the naked ambition that had made her Darkseid's most trusted servant. Apocalypse requires assistance in acquiring something called the anti-life equation, a mathematical proof that eliminates free will, reducing all sentient beings to extensions of Darkseid's consciousness. The equation exists in fragments scattered across this universe, some hidden on Earth itself within the minds of certain humans. Your empire's systematic approach to conquest, your surveillance technology, your military discipline, these would greatly accelerate Darkseid's search. She leaned forward, fire eyes blazing with fervor. "Together, we could reshape this universe into perfect order. No more chaos, no more rebellion, no more individuals selfishly pursuing their own desires at the expense of collective harmony. Everyone would serve, everyone would obey, and reality itself would bend to unified purpose." Batman felt cold spreading through his chest despite the suit's temperature regulation. This was worse than he'd anticipated. Not just a military alliance, but an ideological fusion. The Empire's authoritarian methodology combined with Darkseid's cosmic power to eliminate freedom across all existence. "Hal," he whispered into their encrypted comm, "are you getting all this?" The Green Lantern's constructs had solidified into weapons configurations, emerald energy barely restrained. "Every word. The Guardians need to hear this. If Apocalypse and the Empire coordinate anti-life equation searches using Imperial technology and systematic conquest, they could actually find it. And if Darkseid gets the equation backed by Star Destroyer fleets..." Hal didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone who'd fought Apocalypse understood what the anti-life equation represented. The end of choice, the death of individuality, the transformation of all conscious beings into puppets dancing on Darkseid's strings. Vader stood silent for a long moment, his breathing the only sound in the pocket of atmosphere. Through the Force, and Batman's sensors were sophisticated enough to detect the energy fluctuations, the Dark Lord was considering the offer with the cold calculation that had made him the Emperor's chosen weapon. "The anti-life equation," Vader finally said, "eliminates free will across all existence. That includes Imperial citizens, my stormtroopers, even myself. How does Darkseid propose we maintain command structure and operational effectiveness if everyone becomes extensions of his consciousness?" It was a practical question rather than moral objection, Batman noted with disgust. Vader wasn't rejecting the concept of destroying free will. He was questioning the implementation details. Granny laughed, the sound like nails scraping across coffins. "Lord Vader, you misunderstand the equation's elegance. Darkseid does not desire mindless slaves. He requires competent servants executing his will with perfect loyalty. The equation eliminates the possibility of rebellion, the weakness of individual desire conflicting with collective purpose, but it preserves the skills and intelligence that make beings useful." She gestured at her attendants. "These are my children, broken and remade through more primitive methods than the equation, yet they retain their capabilities while serving Apocalypse with absolute devotion. Imagine your Empire's forces operating with that same perfect loyalty, no possibility of defection, no risk of traitors like your rebel alliance undermining legitimate authority." Her smile widened. "You would still command, Lord Vader. But you would simply do so without the constant vigilance required to prevent betrayal." The offer was seductive in its horror, Batman realized. Everything the Empire claimed to value, order, stability, systematic control, taken to its absolute extreme through cosmic mathematics that made dissent literally impossible. For authoritarian minds like Vader's, the temptation would be overwhelming. A universe where rebellion could not exist, where every being functioned in perfect harmony toward collective goals, where the chaos that had destroyed the Republic could never arise again. It was tyranny perfected, evil made systematic, the death of everything that made consciousness meaningful, wrapped in promises of eternal peace. "I will need to consult with my Emperor," Vader said. And Batman felt a moment of relief that the Sith Lord wasn't accepting immediately, followed by a crushing realization that he was considering the offer seriously enough to bring it to Palpatine. "Of course," Granny inclined her head with false respect. "Darkseid understands that such momentous decisions require contemplation. But be aware, Lord Vader, that other forces also seek dimensional stability in our universe. If the Empire declines our generous offer, we may need to extend it to competitors who would appreciate Apocalypse's friendship." The threat was barely veiled. Reject this alliance and Darkseid would find other empires, other conquerors, other authoritarian forces to empower against both the Empire and Earth. Vader's helmet tilted slightly, processing the implication. What other forces? I was under the impression Earth was this universe's dominant civilization. Granny's laugh returned, colder this time. Earth is merely one planet with an outsized population of metahumans. There are cosmic empires, the Reach, the Coons, the Citadel, that would eagerly accept our offer if the Galactic Empire proves short-sighted. The negotiation continued for another 30 minutes, details being hammered out with bureaucratic precision that would have been boring if it weren't planning the end of free will. Granny offered initial dimensional anchor specifications and locations of anti-life equation fragments that Apocalypse had already identified. Vader provided tactical assessments of Earth's defenders and analysis of which Justice League members posed the greatest threats to coordinated Apocalypse Empire operations. They discussed timetables for implementation. Vader wanted months to establish secure positions on Earth before beginning anti-life searches, while Granny pushed for immediate action before the Justice League could organize effective resistance. Eventually, they settled on a compromise. The Empire would receive dimensional anchor technology immediately, but would wait 30 days before actively assisting with equation searches, giving them time to deepen their infiltration of Earth's power structures through Luthor, Waller, and other human collaborators. "This meeting has been productive," Vader said as the negotiation reached its conclusion. "I will present your offer to Emperor Palpatine and recommend its acceptance. In the interim, our Apocalypse and the Empire should maintain operational coordination to ensure Earth's defenders do not interfere with either of our interests." Granny nodded, her maternal mask returning. "Darkseid will be pleased. And Lord Vader?" Her eyes blazed brighter. "When next we meet, it will be to watch this universe transformed into perfect order. No more Justice Leagues imposing their chaotic morality. No more rebel alliances fighting against legitimate authority. Just peace, eternal and absolute, with everyone serving their proper function in the grand design." The boom tube opened behind her, and the Apocalyptian delegation withdrew through the dimensional gateway like demons returning to hell. Vader stood alone in the pocket of atmosphere for a long moment after the Apocalyptians departed, his force awareness extending through space in search of any surveillance or eavesdropping. Batman held his breath, Hal's constructs tightening their stealth cocoon to maximum density, both heroes becoming as close to invisible as physics allowed. The Dark Lord's presence swept past their position like searchlights probing darkness, force senses questing for any disturbance in the cosmic energy that might indicate observers. For 3 eternal seconds, Batman was certain they'd been discovered, that Vader's supernatural awareness had penetrated their defenses and their mission would end in capture or death. Then the Sith Lord turned and returned to his shuttle, the Devastator beginning its transit back toward Earth orbit, and Batman finally allowed himself to exhale. "Tell me we got all of that," Hal said, or his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Tell me the League heard every word of that nightmare so we can justify removing both those threats from our solar system." Batman checked the transmission logs, confirming that everything had been broadcast to the Watchtower in real time via quantum-encrypted channels. They heard it. Superman, Diana, everyone. They know the Empire is considering an alliance with Darkseid to hunt for the anti-life equation and establish permanent presence in our dimension. He activated the Javelin's propulsion systems, beginning the long return journey to Earth. Which means the debate about whether to trust the Empire is over. Now we're discussing when and how to go to war. The flight back passed in grim silence, both heroes processing the implications of what they'd witnessed. Somewhere ahead of them, the Devastator was returning to rejoin its fleet, Vader already composing the communication to Emperor Palpatine that would decide whether the Galactic Empire accepted Darkseid's offer of dimensional stability in exchange for helping eliminate free will across the universe. On Earth, the Justice League would be preparing for conflict, mobilizing allies, fortifying defenses, and making the impossible calculations about how to fight a two-front war against both Imperial technology and apocalyptic god power simultaneously. And in the dark spaces between dimensions, Darkseid watched it all unfold with the satisfaction of a chess master moving pieces into checkmate positions, knowing that whether the Empire accepted or rejected his offer, the chaos created by their conflict with Earth's heroes served Apocalypse's interests perfectly. Batman stared at the distant blue sphere of Earth growing larger in the viewport, his mind already racing through tactical scenarios and strategic options. They'd gathered the intelligence they needed, confirmed the Empire's willingness to cooperate with cosmic evil, and provided the Justice League with justification for military action. But the victory felt hollow, because winning this war would require the very things Batman had spent his entire career trying to avoid. Preemptive strikes against enemies who hadn't technically attacked yet, military action based on intercepted communications rather than overt aggression, and the transformation of Earth's heroes into precisely the kind of authoritarian force that Vader claimed they already were. The Empire and Apocalypse were forcing the Justice League to choose between their principles and their survival. And Batman, who had always found third options where others saw only binary choices, couldn't see a way to win this fight without becoming the monsters they were fighting against. Unless they found the fault line in the Empire-Apocalypse alliance and drove a wedge through it before the dimensional anchor made their coordination permanent. Unless they could make Vader understand that serving Darkseid's anti-life crusade would destroy even the order the Empire claimed to value. Unless someone with absolute power chose to reject it for moral reasons, demonstrating that not all superpowered beings inevitably became tyrants. Unless Superman could prove, one more time, that hope mattered more than pragmatism, and that doing the right thing was worth the cost, even when the cost might be everything. Batman didn't believe in hope the way Clark did. But as Earth grew larger in the viewport and war became inevitable, he found himself hoping anyway. Because the alternative was unthinkable. The Watchtower's war room erupted into controlled chaos as the full Justice League, extended allies, and Earth's governmental representatives absorbed the intelligence Batman and Green Lantern had gathered. Superman stood at the holographic display, his expression carrying the weight of someone whose fundamental belief in redemption had just been violently challenged by reality. Here the recording played on repeat, Vader and Granny Goodness negotiating the end of free will with the casual professionalism of executives discussing a merger. Wonder Woman's hand remained locked on her sword hilt, knuckles white with barely restrained fury. Aquaman's trident hummed with Atlantean magic as the king processed threats to his ocean kingdom. Cyborg's technological consciousness churned through combat scenarios, calculating probability matrices that showed Earth's chances of survival decreasing with every variable he introduced. And in the corner, John Constantine chain-smoked despite the Watchtower's no-smoking policy. Because when cosmic evil and interdimensional tyranny were planning to eliminate free will, regulations seemed pointless. 30 days, Diana spoke first, her voice carrying the cold precision of an Amazon war captain planning campaigns. They gave themselves 30 days before actively searching for anti-life equation fragments. That means we have less than a month to remove the Imperial fleet from our solar system, fortify Earth against Apocalypse invasion, and prepare for the coordinated assault that will inevitably follow. She pulled up tactical displays showing Themyscira's defenses, Atlantean military deployments, and every superhero team Earth could muster. I have 10,000 Amazon warriors ready to deploy. Aquaman commands the Atlantean armies. The Green Lantern Corps can provide cosmic support. We outnumber 4 Star Destroyers and whatever forces Apocalypse commits to their alliance. We can win this, but only if we strike before they consolidate their coordination. You're talking about starting a war based on an intercepted conversation about a deal they haven't actually accepted yet, came a new voice, and heads turned toward Amanda Waller as the government official stepped forward with the aggressive confidence of someone who believed herself the only adult in a room of superpowered children. I've reviewed Batman's intelligence. Vader said he needed to consult his Emperor before accepting Darkseid's offer. That means they haven't committed to this alliance. If we attack Imperial forces before they've actually done anything hostile, we're the aggressors, and every nation on Earth will question whether the Justice League has the right to start intergalactic wars without governmental approval. Her expression hardened. Mama, I don't like the Empire any more than you do, but I like the precedent of superheroes unilaterally declaring war even less. Superman nodded slowly, clearly struggling with the same moral calculations. Waller's right. If we attack the Empire for considering an alliance rather than actually forming one, we prove Vader's narrative that Earth's heroes won't allow peaceful coexistence. We make ourselves the tyrants we're trying to prevent. He looked at Batman. Bruce, you heard the entire conversation. Did Vader actually accept Darkseid's offer, or was he stalling for time while gathering information? Batman's jaw tightened. He expressed interest and promised to present the offer to Emperor Palpatine with a recommendation for acceptance. That's not the same as formal commitment, but it demonstrates willingness to cooperate with Darkseid that makes them hostile forces by any reasonable assessment. Reasonable assessment isn't the same as proof, Waller countered, pulling up her own intelligence files. I've been in contact with Imperial representatives through back channels. Yes, I know the League disapproves, but I'm the director of Task Force X, and it's my job to assess potential threats and assets. Lieutenant Kira, their liaison to Earth, has indicated that Vader's position within the Empire is complicated. He serves Emperor Palpatine, but he doesn't always agree with Imperial policy. There's a possibility he's gathering intelligence on Apocalypse for tactical purposes rather than seriously considering their alliance. She highlighted communications intercepts. If we attack now, and we eliminate that possibility and drive the Empire completely into Darkseid's arms out of necessity rather than choice. Wonder Woman's divine fury blazed across the war room like physical heat. You've been in contact with them? While they negotiate with cosmic evil, you've been having back-channel conversations? Her hand moved toward her lasso, the lasso of truth that compelled honesty from anyone it bound. What else have you discussed with Imperial representatives, Director Waller? What agreements have you made while Earth's heroes attempted to protect this planet from authoritarian threats? Waller didn't flinch, meeting the Amazon's gaze with the iron will that had let a baseline human command supervillains and survive encounters with beings who could kill her with a thought. One, I've discussed technology transfers that would give Earth's governments the capability to defend against metahuman threats if the Justice League ever goes rogue. I've discussed training protocols that would improve our special forces' effectiveness against superhuman combatants. And yes, I've discussed contingencies for dealing with the League itself if you decide your power gives you the right to ignore democratic oversight. The room exploded. Aquaman's trident crackled with magical energy. Green Lantern's ring formed weapons constructs aimed at Waller. Flash vibrated with kinetic fury that scorched the floor beneath his feet. Constantine muttered something about bloody government wankers making deals with space fascists. Only Superman's raised hand prevented immediate violence, or his heat vision glowing red before he forced it back to blue. "Stand down, everyone," Clark commanded, his voice carrying the authority that made him the League's leader despite Batman's superior tactics. "Waller's doing what she thinks protects humanity. We don't have to agree with her methods to understand her motivations." He turned to the director. "But understand this. If you've provided the Empire with information about League weaknesses or capabilities, you've committed treason against Earth itself by aiding forces that are negotiating with Darkseid." "I've committed pragmatism," Waller shot back. "You want to talk about treason? How about superpowered beings who operate outside all governmental authority, intervene in sovereign nations without permission, and make decisions affecting billions based on their personal judgment?" The Injustice timeline proved what happens when superheroes decide they know better than everyone else. Superman became a dictator who murdered anyone who opposed his vision of peace. I'm preparing for the possibility that this timeline's league follows the same path. She pulled up files showing Injustice Superman's regime, the alternate reality where Clark's grief had transformed him into a tyrant. The Empire's authoritarian, yes, but at least they're systematic about it, answerable to governmental structure rather than personal whim. I can negotiate with systems. I can't negotiate with gods who decide one day that humanity needs to be ruled for its own good. Batman stepped between Waller and the League before Diana could draw her sword. This debate is pointless. We're arguing about philosophy while the Empire and Apocalypse coordinate strategies to eliminate free will across the universe. He pulled up the recording of Vader's negotiation. Focus on the actual threat. Darkseid offered dimensional anchor technology that would let the Empire bring unlimited reinforcements from their home galaxy. If they accept that offer and Palpatine sends Star Destroyer fleets through dimensional gateways, Earth faces military occupation by forces we cannot defeat through superhuman power alone. His cowl turned toward Superman. Clark, I understand your desire to give them every chance for redemption, but we're past the point where diplomacy can resolve this. The Empire has demonstrated willingness to cooperate with cosmic evil. We need to remove them from our solar system before that cooperation becomes operational. And how exactly do we remove 4 Star Destroyers without starting the war you're claiming we want to prevent? Superman asked, frustration bleeding through his normally composed demeanor. We attack them. They defend themselves. Earth's government see the Justice League initiating violence against refugees who were seeking asylum, and Vader gets exactly the narrative he wanted. Proof that Earth's heroes are aggressive tyrants who won't tolerate competition for authority. Clark's fists clenched hard enough that the conference table creaked under the pressure. There has to be another way. Some approach that doesn't require us to become the monsters we're fighting. There isn't, Wonder Woman said quietly, and the finality in her voice silenced every other conversation. I have lived for 3,000 years, fought in countless wars, watched empires rise and fall. There is no diplomatic solution when dealing with forces that view compromise as weakness and peace as temporary truce before renewed conquest. She stood, divine presence filling the room like pressure before a storm. The Empire will accept Darkseid's offer because authoritarians always choose power over principle. They will establish their dimensional anchor, summon their fleets, and transform Earth into another world, ground beneath imperial rule. The only question is whether we fight them now, while we hold numerical and positional advantage, or later, after they've fortified their position and eliminated our tactical superiority. Her eyes blazed with Olympian fire. I vote for war, immediate, overwhelming, and without mercy for those who would negotiate the end of free will. Aquaman's voice carried the weight of ocean depths and ancient kingdoms. Atlantis stands with Themyscira. The Empire's presence threatens my people as much as yours. We cannot allow dimensional gateways to stabilize in our solar system, cannot permit apocalyptic forces to establish coordination with imperial military doctrine. His trident struck the floor with force that cracked reinforced materials. The 7 seas will rise against this threat. Every kingdom beneath the waves, every Atlantean warrior, every creature that swims in darkness will answer the call. But Wonder Woman is correct. We must strike before they complete their preparations. Or waiting for the perfect diplomatic solution means waiting until we've already lost. The tide was turning, Batman observed with cold satisfaction, mixed with troubling recognition of what they were becoming. The Justice League, Earth's greatest heroes, voting for preemptive war based on intelligence gathering and threat assessment rather than actual aggression. It was the right tactical decision. The Empire's willingness to work with Darkseid made them existential threats that needed elimination. But it was also the kind of decision that authoritarian regimes made constantly, striking first against potential enemies before they could become actual threats. The League was proving Vader's accusations correct, even as they acted to prevent the nightmare scenario he represented. We need a plan, Batman said, pulling up holographic schematics of the Star Destroyers. The Empire maintains 4 capital ships in orbit, the Devastator as Vader's flagship, plus 3 support vessels. Combined crew complement of approximately 48,000 personnel, including stormtroopers, TIE fighter pilots, officers, and support staff. He highlighted the ship's weapon systems, shield generators, and hangar bays with the thoroughness that had made him the League's preeminent tactician. Turbo lasers can bombard planetary surfaces from orbit, but are relatively ineffective against fast-moving individual targets like Superman or Wonder Woman. Point defense systems are designed for capital ship combat, not engaging superhumans. Their greatest advantage is numbers and coordination. They can put thousands of TI fighters into space and maintain sustained fire that would overwhelm even our heaviest hitters through attrition. Batman zoomed in on critical systems. But they have weaknesses. The shield generators are external, vulnerable to targeted strikes. The reactor cores are heavily armored but not indestructible. And most importantly, they're designed to fight conventional military forces, not beings who can operate in hard vacuum, move faster than light, or channel divine power through ancient weapons. So we hit them fast and hard, Flash said, yellow lightning crackling around his form. I phased through their hulls, sabotaged the shield generators from inside. Superman and Wonder Woman provide heavy assault on the exposed reactor cores. Green Lantern Corps creates constructs to contain the TIE fighter swarms. Aquaman and the Atlanteans provide support from Earth's surface in case any debris threatens population centers. He looked around the table. We could take out all 4 ships in under an hour if we coordinate properly. Quick, clean, overwhelming force that doesn't give them time to respond or call for apocalyptic backup. Cyborg's technological consciousness churned through probability matrices, holographic displays showing success percentages that made everyone uncomfortable. There's a 73% chance we can destroy the Imperial fleet before they mount effective resistance. But there's also a 61% chance that doing so will trigger immediate retaliation from Apocalypse. Or Darkseid won't ignore us eliminating his potential allies. He'll view it as aggression against his interests and respond accordingly. The percentages shifted as he added new variables. If we attack the Empire, we need to be prepared for boom tubes opening and parademon armies deploying within hours. This won't be a single battle against 4 Star Destroyers. It'll be the opening engagement of a war against both Imperial remnants and Apocalyptian invasion forces simultaneously. Then we fight both, Wonder Woman declared with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never lost a war she chose to engage. Earth has faced Apocalypse before and survived. We've defeated Darkseid's invasions through combined forces and unified purpose. Or adding Imperial technology to the threat assessment changes tactics but not fundamental strategy. We destroy the invaders through superior skill, divine power, and the will to protect our home regardless of cost. She looked at each hero in turn. I understand the reluctance to strike first. I respect the desire to exhaust diplomatic options, but we have exhausted them. The Empire negotiated with Darkseid. They considered his offer seriously enough to bring it to their Emperor. They have demonstrated that when faced with the choice between coexistence with Earth's heroes and cooperation with cosmic evil, they choose evil. There is nothing left to negotiate. Superman stood alone at the viewport, staring down at Earth while the weight of leadership crushed down on shoulders that had lifted planets, but struggled beneath the burden of this decision. Behind him, the Justice League waited for his judgment, for the word that would either prevent war through continued diplomacy or initiate it through preemptive strike. Clark Kent had spent his entire life believing in redemption, in second chances, in the fundamental goodness that existed even in beings who'd made terrible choices. He'd faced Lex Luthor countless times and never killed him despite how many lives it would save, because crossing that line would make him the tyrant Luthor claimed he was. He'd fought Darkseid himself and offered mercy when victory was achieved, because hope demanded that even gods of evil could choose differently. But this time, the stakes weren't just Metropolis or Earth or even the universe. This time, the threat was the anti-life equation backed by imperial military methodology. This time, hope had to give way to necessity. "We go to war," Superman said quietly, and the words felt like betrayal of everything he'd ever believed. "We give Vader one final chance to surrender and leave our solar system peacefully. If he refuses, when he refuses, we destroy the Imperial fleet with overwhelming force before they can establish their dimensional anchor or summon apocalyptic support." He turned to face the League, and his eyes carried the terrible weight of someone who'd just chosen to become the thing he'd always feared. "But we do it right. Minimal casualties if possible. We offer evacuation to Imperial personnel who surrender. And we don't become monsters ourselves just because we're fighting them. His voice hardened with determination that had moved planets and stopped armies. And when Darkseid responds, because he will respond, we make it clear that Earth is not a world that bows to tyrants, whether they come from other galaxies or other dimensions. We fight, we win, and we prove that freedom matters more than order, that choice matters more than stability, and that beings with godlike power can choose to protect rather than rule. The Watchtower's communication system activated, projecting Vader's image into the war room with timing that suggested the Dark Lord had been monitoring their discussion through methods Batman would need to investigate and eliminate. Justice League, Vader's mechanical voice carried across the transmission. Yeah, I have just received word from Emperor Palpatine regarding Apocalypse's offer. The room fell silent, every hero holding breath despite not needing to. The Emperor has instructed me to accept Darkseid's proposal with certain modifications to ensure Imperial sovereignty remains intact during our cooperation. We will receive dimensional anchor technology, will assist in locating anti-life equation fragments, and will coordinate our strategic interests with Apocalypse against mutual threats. His breathing apparatus created its rhythmic cadence. You are hereby informed that the Galactic Empire and Apocalypse have entered into formal alliance. Any aggression against Imperial forces will be considered aggression against Apocalypse, and will be met with combined military response. Darkseid offers you one opportunity to surrender your planet peacefully before overwhelming force makes surrender your only option. The transmission cut off, leaving the Justice League staring at the space where Vader's image had been, processing the reality that the nightmare scenario had just become operational. The Empire had accepted. Darkseid and Palpatine were allies. Earth faced coordinated assault from authoritarian empire and cosmic tyranny simultaneously. And the war everyone had tried to prevent through diplomacy, through hope, through the stubborn belief that even the darkest forces could choose redemption, had finally become inevitable. Wonder Woman drew her sword, divine metal singing with purpose. Aquaman's trident blazed with Atlantean magic. Green Lantern's ring erupted in emerald fury. Flash became lightning incarnate. And Superman's eyes glowed red with heat vision that could burn through planets, as the Man of Steel finally accepted what Batman had known from the beginning. Some enemies could not be reasoned with, could not be redeemed, could only be stopped through overwhelming force applied without hesitation or mercy. The time for hope had passed. The time for war had come. And Earth's heroes would prove what they'd always known but rarely needed to demonstrate. That beings with godlike power fighting to protect freedom were more dangerous than empires built on fear, or gods who demanded worship. The battle for Earth's future was about to begin, and the galaxy would learn what happened when you threatened a world of heroes who refused to kneel. The battle for Earth began not with trumpets or declarations but with silence. The terrible quiet that preceded orbital bombardment as 4 Star Destroyers powered weapon systems and shifted into combat formations above a planet that had never faced unified assault from both interdimensional tyranny and galactic empire simultaneously. In the Watchtower, klaxons wailed as sensors detected the Imperial fleet's tactical repositioning. Across Earth's surface, heroes mobilized with the coordinated precision of defenders who'd trained for this moment despite praying it would never come. On Themyscira, 10,000 Amazon warriors donned armor blessed by Olympian gods and gripped weapons forged in divine fires, their war cries echoing across an island hidden from mortal sight for millennia. Beneath Atlantic waves, Aquaman's armies assembled in formations that blotted out bioluminescence from coral cities, tridents, and magical weaponry creating constellations of power in ocean depths. And in Gotham, Central City, Coast City, and every urban center where heroes operated, emergency protocols activated that would evacuate civilians and fortify defensive positions against the rain of fire that orbital weapons could deliver. Superman hung in space between Earth and the Imperial fleet, cape streaming in solar winds, heat vision glowing red as he stared at the Devastator's bridge viewport where Vader stood watching him with equal intensity. The Kryptonian had flown alone to this position, against Batman's tactical advice and Wonder Woman's warrior pragmatism, because some part of him still believed that if one being of immense power could reach another, If Superman could make Vader understand what they were about to unleash, perhaps the final moment of war could be transformed into the first moment of peace. It was naive, Clark knew, the kind of hopeful thinking that had gotten him hurt countless times. But he was Superman, and hope was what he did. Lord Vader, Clark's voice carried across a vacuum through communication channels, you're making a mistake. Darkseid doesn't want an ally. He wants a weapon to use and discard. The anti-life equation will eliminate free will across all existence, including your Empire's personnel. You'll destroy everything you claim to protect in service to a god who views all beings as tools for his apotheosis. Vader's response came through ship-to-ship communications, mechanical breathing preceding words delivered with absolute certainty. I am aware of the risks, Superman. The Empire has dealt with threats greater than Darkseid before. We destroyed the Jedi Order, crushed the Rebel Alliance, brought stability to millions of chaotic systems. Apocalypse offers us the means to establish permanent presence in your universe, and in exchange, we provide assistance locating mathematical formulae. It is a pragmatic arrangement between forces that recognize order's necessity. The Dark Lord's image appeared on holographic projection, armored form radiating authority. You could join us, Kal-El. Your power, combined with Imperial discipline and apocalyptian resources, could reshape this universe into something better than the chaos that currently defines it. No more crime, no more war, no more individual suffering because society values freedom over security. Perfect peace, you're enforced by being strong enough to maintain it. That's not peace, Superman said quietly, and his eyes blazed brighter with heat vision that could melt through Star Destroyer hulls if he chose to unleash it. That's tyranny wearing peace's mask. I've seen what happens when beings with power decide to rule for the greater good. I've watched timelines where I became the monster you're describing, where grief and pain made me think control was the answer. It wasn't. It never is. His fists clenched with force that made space itself ripple around them. I'm giving you one last chance, Vader. Power down your weapons. Evacuate your personnel to Earth's surface under Justice League supervision. We'll help you find a way home that doesn't require allying with cosmic evil or threatening the freedom of 7 billion people. But if you fire on Earth, if you bring Darkseid's forces to our world, I will stop you, and I won't hold back. For a moment, a single crystalline instant where possibility hung suspended between choices, Vader hesitated. Through the Force, the Dark Lord felt Superman's sincerity, the genuine belief that redemption remained possible even now, the stubborn hope that defined the Kryptonian even in the face of overwhelming evidence that some beings could not be saved. It reminded Vader of Padme, of the woman who'd believed Anakin Skywalker could be redeemed even as he choked her in rage-fueled betrayal. That hope had been wrong then, proven false by Vader's own choices. But some ember of the man who'd loved Padme, who'd been a Jedi Knight before the dark side consumed him, stirred in the depths of Vader's mechanically sustained consciousness. What if Superman was right? What if there was still a path away from this war, away from Darkseid's corruption, away from the endless cycle of conquest and control that had defined the Empire since its inception? Then reality reasserted itself. Vader felt Emperor Palpatine's presence across dimensional barriers, his master's dark side power reaching through the Force to remind him of duty, of the order they'd built together, of the peace that required strength to maintain. The moment of hesitation passed. I was once like you, Superman, Vader said, and for the first time, his mechanical voice carried something that might have been regret. I believed in justice and honor. I thought beings with power had a responsibility to protect the weak without controlling them. The Jedi taught those principles, and they led the galaxy into war that killed trillions. I learned that idealism without strength is meaningless, that freedom without order is chaos, and that sometimes protecting people requires making choices they will hate you for. His hand moved to his lightsaber hilt. I'm sorry you'll have to learn that lesson the hard way. All batteries, open fire. The Devastator's turbo lasers erupted in emerald fury, thousands of plasma bolts streaking toward Earth's orbital space where the Justice League had positioned themselves as humanity's final shield. Superman became a crimson and blue blur, heat vision sweeping across the incoming fire to detonate bolts before they could reach Earth's atmosphere. Wonder Woman materialized through boom tube, provided by Cyborg, on her sword blazing with divine light as she carved through weapon fire with Amazon precision. Green Lantern. Hal Jordan and 24 core members created emerald barriers that absorbed fire, meant to slag continents. Their willpower made manifest holding against Imperial firepower through sheer determination. The Flash vibrated through incoming projectiles, his connection to the Speed Force allowing him to exist in temporal spaces between the plasma bolt's molecular structure, emerging on Star Destroyer hulls to begin sabotaging shield generators from within. But the Empire had prepared for superhuman opposition. Vader had studied Justice League tactics during his time in Earth orbit, analyzed their powers, calculated countermeasures based on the Empire's experience fighting Force users and beings with abilities beyond standard physics. As Flash phased into the Devastator's shield generator chamber, gravity wells activated, Imperial technology that created localized singularities calibrated to disrupt speedster temporal displacement. Barry found himself suddenly locked into normal time, Speed Force connections severed by gravitational shearing that made physics reassert itself with crushing force. Stormtroopers opened fire with blasters set to wide dispersal, filling the chamber with energy that even superhuman reflexes couldn't entirely dodge. Flash took hits to shoulder and thigh, armor absorbing most of the damage but pain shooting through his nervous system as he realized the Empire had learned from previous encounters and adapted. Superman crashed through turbo laser batteries, his invulnerable form shrugging off plasma fire that could reduce mountains to slag, tearing through Durasteel armor with Kryptonian strength that made ship's hull plating look like tissue paper. But Vader had prepared for the Kryptonian too. As Clark ripped through the Devastator's exterior toward the reactor core, radiation emitters activated. Devices Luthor had helped the Empire calibrate, using Imperial technology tuned to frequencies that affected Kryptonian cellular biology. Not kryptonite, which Superman had developed resistance to through repeated exposure, but something subtly different. Radiation that made his powers fluctuate unpredictably. Superman's heat vision guttered like a candle in wind. His flight became erratic. His invulnerability weakened enough that turbolaser fire started actually hurting, searing his skin with plasma heat that should have been completely ineffective. For the first time in decades, Clark Kent felt genuinely vulnerable, and the fear that accompanied that realization nearly proved fatal, as a lucky turbolaser shot sent him spinning through vacuum, stunned and disoriented. Wonder Woman saw Superman's distress and adjusted her assault vector, divine speed carrying her toward the radiation emitters to destroy them before they could kill Earth's greatest defender. But Granny Goodness had been waiting for precisely that response. A boom tube opened directly in Diana's path, and through it poured apocalyptian furies, elite warriors of Darkseid blessed with powers that could challenge gods. Guillotina's blade clashed against Wonder Woman's sword with impact that created shockwaves visible from Earth's surface. Stompa's strength matched Amazon might, in wrestling match that crushed ship's hull beneath their struggle. Bernadette's Farron knife blazed with fire that even divine armor struggled to resist. And above them all, Granny Goodness watched with maternal satisfaction as her children engaged the warrior princess, buying time for Imperial weapons to finish what they'd started with Superman. Green Lantern Corps members created constructs of impossible complexity. Giant fists to punch through Star Destroyer armor, energy weapons to match turbolaser fire, shields to protect Earth from orbital bombardment. But TIE fighters swarmed them in numbers that turned space into maze of screaming engines and laser fire. Thousands of Imperial pilots executing coordinated attack patterns with fanatical precision. One lantern fell, ring failing as concentrated fire overwhelmed willpower's limits. Then another. Then three more in rapid succession, as the Empire demonstrated that superior numbers and tactical coordination could defeat even cosmic powers through attrition and mathematical certainty. Hal Jordan watched his comrades die and felt rage building inside him, the kind of fury that made Ring's pulse brighter, that tipped Green Lanterns toward the red spectrum of violence and revenge. On Earth's surface, the war reached ground level as boom tubes opened across every major city, disgorging Paradaman armies that had waited in apocalyptic staging dimensions for precisely this moment. Darkseid had planned this invasion for months, using the Empire's arrival as distraction while positioning his forces for overwhelming strike. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Our Beijing. Every population center simultaneously faced shrieking hordes of winged monsters bred for warfare and empowered by fear itself. The Teen Titans mobilized in Jump City. Robin's tactical mind coordinating Starfire's alien firepower, Raven's dark magic, Beast Boy's shapeshifting, and Cyborg's technological warfare against enemies that kept coming in, waves that tested even young heroes' determination. In Gotham, Batman deployed every contingency he'd prepared. The Bat family striking from shadows against parademons unused to facing humans who fought with intelligence rather than power, turning the city's darkness into weapon against invaders. But Earth's heroes were spread thin, fighting on too many fronts against enemies who'd coordinated their assault with precision that proved Vader and Darkseid had been planning this for longer than the Justice League suspected. In Metropolis, Lex Luthor stood in his penthouse watching the battle rage across his city's skies and made a decision that would define his legacy. He activated the Imperial weapons Lieutenant Kira had helped him build: anti-Kryptonian radiation emitters, molecular disruptors, gravity manipulation technology, and turned them not against Superman, as Vader had expected, but against the Imperial Star Destroyers themselves. Because Lex Luthor had never met a tyrant he couldn't betray at the moment of maximum advantage, had never encountered a power structure he couldn't exploit for personal gain, and had realized something the Empire hadn't: that being Earth's savior against both Imperial and Apocalyptian threats would give him more power than serving either master. Vader, Luthor's voice cut through battle communications with smug satisfaction. Did you really think I'd let you turn Earth into another conquered system? I'm humanity's protector, not its betrayer. And right now, protecting humanity means destroying everyone who threatens it, including you. LexCorp orbital platforms activated. Weapons reverse-engineered from Imperial technology turning against their creators. Precisely targeted strikes hitting the Devastator's already compromised shields with the kind of accuracy that only Lex Luthor's genius could achieve. The Star Destroyer's shields flickered, failed, and collapsed as Luthor's weapons found every weakness Batman had identified and Flash had sabotaged. The reactor core lay exposed, vulnerable to the massed firepower that Earth's defenders could now concentrate without shields absorbing their attacks. Superman recovered from the radiation's effects, Luthor's betrayal of the Empire having shut down the emitters as an inadvertent side effect of his orbital strike. Clark's powers surged back to full capacity, and he became vengeance incarnate, heat vision carving through the Devastator's hull toward the reactor core with precision designed to cripple rather than kill. Because even now, even in the fury of battle against enemies who'd tried to eliminate free will across the universe, Superman refused to cross the line into mass murder. He could feel the 12,000 lives aboard the Star Destroyer through his superhearing, could hear their heartbeats and desperate communications and prayers to an emperor who'd sent them to die in a universe not their own. They were victims of the Empire's authoritarian doctrine as much as its weapons. And Clark Kent would not become a killer to stop killers, would not sacrifice his humanity to save humanity, would not prove Vader right about power corrupting even the most idealistic heroes. The Devastator's reactor went critical under combined assault from Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern Corps, and Luthor's betrayal. Vader stood on the bridge as alarms wailed and systems failed, as the ship that had been his flagship for decades died around him, taking thousands of loyal Imperial personnel with it into the cold vacuum of space. Through the Force, he felt their deaths, each life winking out like candle extinguished, each consciousness crying out in final terror before silence claimed them. The Dark Lord had commanded Star Destroyers for so long that their crews felt like extensions of his own will, tools wielded with precision, but still possessed of individual worth. And now they were dying because he'd chosen wrong, had allied with Darkseid instead of accepting Superman's offer of asylum, had believed that Imperial doctrine would triumph over superhuman power when all evidence suggested otherwise. All remaining ships, Vader commanded, through communications that crackled with damage. Retreat to coordinates Alpha 79, and activate hyperspace drives for emergency jump. The other 3 Star Destroyers began withdrawing, shields buckling under Justice League assault, hulls scarred by weapons fire that proved Earth's defenders had been holding back during diplomatic phase. But Darkseid wasn't finished. A boom tube opened directly before the fleeing Imperial vessels, and through it stepped the Dark God himself, Omega beams already building behind his eyes with the power to eliminate anything from existence. You have failed, Vader. Darkseid's voice carried across all frequencies, power incarnate speaking to insignificant mortals. The Empire proved inadequate to the task of conquering Earth, but Apocalypse does not fail. This world will kneel before Darkseid, its heroes will serve the anti-life equation, and all existence will learn the price of defying the Lord of Apocalypse. Superman and Darkseid's eyes met across the void, and the battle that had been waged by armies and fleets suddenly became personal contest between God and alien, between tyranny's ultimate expression and hope's greatest champion. They'd fought before, multiple times across multiple timelines, cosmic struggles that had reshaped reality and broken worlds. But this time felt different, weighted with finality that suggested one of them would not survive the day. Clark took a breath he didn't need in vacuum, feeling Earth's yellow sun energizing his cells, remembering every person he'd ever saved and every reason he chose protection over domination despite power that could rule galaxies. "I've beaten you before, Darkseid," Superman said quietly, "and I'll beat you again. Because you'll never understand that the power to destroy means nothing without the choice not to use it. That's what makes me stronger than you. Not my abilities. My restraint." Darkseid smiled with the contempt of a being who'd crushed civilizations and broken gods. "We shall see, Kryptonian. We shall see." The Omega beams fired, reality-erasing energy that could kill even Superman if it connected, and Clark moved, faster than light, faster than thought, becoming crimson and blue streak that wove between beams that eliminated everything they touched. Behind them, the war continued. Wonder Woman and the Furies locked in combat that shook space itself. Green Lanterns holding against Parademon swarms through sheer willpower made manifest. Atlantean forces rising from oceans to defend coastal cities. Our Amazon warriors teleporting through boom tubes Cyborg provided to fight parademons in urban centers. Batman coordinating Earth's defense with tactical genius that turned chaos into calculated response. The battle for Earth had fully begun, and its outcome would determine whether freedom survived or whether the galaxy learned what happened when gods of tyranny faced a world that refused to kneel. Vader stood in the Devastator's dying bridge, watching Superman fight Darkseid while his empire burned around him, and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades since Mustafar's flames had consumed Anakin Skywalker. Doubt. Doubt that the Emperor's path was right. Doubt that order through tyranny brought genuine peace. Doubt that power without restraint led anywhere but darkness and ash. And in that doubt, the smallest ember of light flickered. The possibility that even the darkest fallen could still choose differently, could still reject the path that had led to this moment of catastrophic failure. Whether that ember would become flame or gutter into extinction, only time would reveal. But as the Devastator exploded around him and Vader felt the Force guiding him toward an escape pod, toward survival and the choices that would follow, he understood that this war was far from over. The Empire had lost this battle, but battles were not wars. And sometimes the greatest victories came from the ashes of defeat, forged by those who learned from failure rather than being destroyed by it. The galaxy would remember this day, and Vader would ensure they remembered what came after. In the silence following the battle of Earth's orbital space, and as debris from the Devastator rained through atmosphere in streaks of fire that looked like falling stars, the survivors counted costs that would take generations to fully comprehend. 3 Imperial Star Destroyers escaped through emergency hyperspace jumps, carrying their wounded forces into unknown regions of the galaxy, while Earth's defenders chose not to pursue, too exhausted from simultaneous battles against Empire and Apocalypse to chase fleeing enemies. Darkseid's invasion failed as it always did when facing Superman and the Unified Justice League, the Dark God retreating through boom tubes with the promise that he would return, as he always did, because tyranny never truly died while those who craved power still breathed. The cost of victory lay scattered across Earth's surface, cities damaged, heroes wounded, with thousands dead from Parademon attacks before Earth's defenders could reach every battlefield simultaneously. But Earth endured. The Justice League stood triumphant despite everything Vader and Darkseid had thrown at them, proving once again that beings with godlike power choosing to protect rather than rule remained the galaxy's greatest force. Lex Luthor leveraged his betrayal of the Empire into political capital, positioning himself as humanity's savior despite having collaborated with authoritarian forces in the first place, because some things never changed and Lex would always find ways to profit from chaos. Amanda Waller's contingency programs gained funding as governments realized that metahuman oversight might actually matter in a universe where dimensional invaders could arrive without warning. And somewhere in deep space, Darth Vader stood aboard a crippled Star Destroyer, staring at the coordinates for his home galaxy, and contemplated whether the Emperor's path was truly the only option for maintaining order in a cosmos that seemed determined to choose chaos. On Earth, Superman floated above the planet, cape streaming in solar winds, watching the world he'd chosen to protect continue spinning through void, resilient despite everything thrown at it. He'd offered Vader redemption and been refused. He'd tried diplomacy and been answered with weapons fire. He'd held back his full power to avoid becoming the tyrant he feared, and Earth had survived because restraint mattered more than dominance. Somewhere in Gotham, Batman filed reports and updated contingencies, are already preparing for the day when the Empire returned or when Darkseid made good on his promises of conquest. In Themyscira, Wonder Woman cleaned her sword and trained her warriors for the wars that would inevitably come, because peace was merely the space between conflicts when defending freedom from those who would destroy it. The Justice League had won this battle, proved that hope and heroism could triumph over systematic tyranny and cosmic evil. But Vader's question remained, echoing across dimensional barriers. At what cost did godlike beings impose their judgment on the universe, and how long before protectors became tyrants themselves? The answer, Superman believed, lay in the choice to keep asking that question, to continually examine whether power was being used to protect or control, to never stop doubting whether today's heroism might become tomorrow's oppression. The Galactic Empire had failed because they'd stopped asking, had accepted that their authority justified any action in service to order. Darkseid had always failed because he'd never asked at all, his certainty absolute that power equaled right. But the Justice League would continue questioning, continue struggling with impossible choices, continue choosing the harder path of protection without domination, even when tyranny seemed more efficient. That was what made them heroes rather than gods. That was what would save the universe in the end. The battle for Earth had concluded. The Empire had been driven away but not destroyed. Apocalypse had retreated but would return. And in the spaces between stars, the war between hope and tyranny, between freedom and control, between those who wielded power with restraint and those who wielded it without mercy, continued its eternal dance. The DC Universe had faced the Galactic Empire and survived, had proven that even authoritarian forces backed by cosmic evil could be defeated by heroes who chose to protect rather than rule. But the galaxy was vast, the multiverse infinite, and somewhere in the darkness, other threats waited. Other empires sought conquest. Other gods demanded worship. And the Justice League would be ready, standing eternal vigil against all who threatened the freedom to choose, the right to exist without bowing to tyranny, the fundamental principle that power without accountability led only to darkness. They were Earth's defenders, the galaxy's hope, proof that even beings with godlike abilities could use them wisely. And they would continue standing, continue fighting, continue choosing the hard path of heroism over the easy path of domination, for as long as threats existed and people needed protecting. The stars shone cold and distant above Earth, and among them, both threat and promise waited.